Good morning. Welcome to the Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, March 4th, 8:30 a.m. Everybody's had their coffee. We're ready to go. And thank you all for joining us at this unusual hour. We just having trouble finding times when all selectmen can be in the same room, which is a high priority. So thank you for joining us this morning. First item on the agenda is discussion of various warrant articles, including the transfer of land in former School Track 4 to the Hingham Municipal Light Plant, amend the general bylaw relative to putting a member of the Recreation Commission on the Community Preservation Committee as an appointment of the Recreation Commission. 4 articles related to the school fields project. An article to turn the athletic fields currently under control of the Board of Selectmen over to the Recreation Commission, and accept Chapter 59, Section 5N relative to veterans' tax reductions. And then we will be rehearing an application for a restaurant common victualler wine and malt license, Stonehearth Pizza in Shipyard Drive. And that's our agenda for this morning. So let us just get right to the first article, which is transfer of land in the former School Track 4 to Hingham Municipal Light Plant. Let me ask Paul Henue, the General Director of the Light Plant, and Walter Foskett from the Light Commissioners to join us, and we'll talk about this proposal. And this is our second meeting on this, and we asked for some clarification last time about the exact lot and so forth, and whether or not it would have to be cordoned off from, a lot line drawn between the current lot, which contains the DPW, or not. And I gather the answer on that is no, right? That in order for this to go forward, we would not have to have a Form A done. Is that?
We do not have to have
okay,
a Form A.
so we don't have that clear. That's clear anyway. And you have brought us a lovely picture of the lot with lot lines, as I requested. Maybe
I did, and
hey,
I
could you
have
put
larger
this?
versions of it as well.
Could you put this on the? Well, we want the folks at home to be able to see it if possible. I don't know if that's doable.
That works or not for the folks at home.
Can you focus in on
we have
the...
a little tray over here where
one.
we put the stuff, put papers, and sometimes you can take this camera and point it right at it and pick up what's on it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we can give it a try. Okay, so you've given us the information we were looking for, and let's just say, anything to add from last time before we have our discussion?
Well, we had a discussion about it, and I think we had talked about contingencies, that type of thing, but with the lot, the way it's delineated, I think the warrant article would just allow the selectmen to transfer it as is, and it would be up to us to go get whatever we need in terms of permits. And if that didn't happen within a certain period of time, then it would just go back to you as surplus. And then when it did come to us and we do get our permitting done, whatever, for building, then the second transfer would be Cushing Street back to you as surplus. So it would be a pretty simple process, I think.
So this would allow us, upon voting the land to be surplus, it would allow us to transfer it to you after we've done that, right? Is that
Town meeting would have the vote. They would say, transfer it over, and
you received, came in late last night. Thank you, Paul and Walter. And Kristen put it in our folders. This is from Deidre from Reuben and Redmond.
Right.
Apparently, they could not connect with Susan Murphy. But this would be the definition of the lot.
that describes
Yes.
the
Yes,
law.
yeah, I did get that, yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
our
they had already-
vote to declare it surplus would be first,
Before,
the vote on the warrant article.
so we would,
I would
so we
think.
would declare it surplus first? Can you
Correct.
help me understand this process?
Any land that's under the control and custody of the Board of Selectmen needs to be declared surplus before a town meeting or any other board can undertake any other action relative to that land. So Irma's correct. The first step would be for you to declare it surplus. At that point in time, town meeting can make a decision about whether or not to transfer that land to the light plant. Once town meeting transfers that land to the light plant, then the light plant would in fact own the property. and could proceed with their development.
Okay. And then, if the permitting did not go as anticipated, then you would declare it surplus again, and it would be transferred back to the Board of Selectmen. Would that be the plan?
That
Well-
would probably be the process, correct?
We would create, I mean, we hopefully create an agreement to that effect, but in the same vein that the light board can't compel you to declare it surplus, you can't compel them to declare it surplus back.
Right, I get that. Although what they would want with it, if they can't
Yeah,
build their
exactly.
building there, I have
There you
no
go.
idea.
5.7 acres in the
We'll
woods.
make you mow it.
Yeah, there you go.
You don't
No
want
thanks.
that.
If,
No
if
thanks.
anyone has not taken the time to go check this out, they're doing us a favor by clearing it, because the next step will be, perhaps Chief Duff will have a wonderful opportunity for some firefighting. It's a mess up there.
Okay, well, I will ask my colleagues for some comments. You want to?
I'm completely for this. I think they've done a great deal of work. I think it's important that we declare the land surplus and let them move forward and get them out of Cushing Street and let them consolidate, so the $125,000 a year or so can go towards lowering our light rates.
According to the memo, this is a question for Ted. According to the memo, there's a vote, is there a vote required by the Massachusetts House or Senate on this at all? Or is it just strictly town meeting?
Just town meeting, as I understand it.
I think this is more
Yeah,
in connection with
yeah,
Carlson
no, I was
Field
just, no,
than-
no, I was,
than
no, I'm
with
just
this.
curious. So
School
it's just,
Track 4 doesn't have any little deed riders on it from the federal government that.
Betty, ask Betty.
The restrictions under School Track 4 expired at the end of the 20-year period.
Okay, so that's all free and clear. Okay. Unlike a lot of the rest of the land around there. Okay, good. Oh, that's nice. I like it when we don't have to go
Yeah,
talk
me
to
too.
this.
I don't have to go to
Forever.
Washington.
We-
It
We
takes
do
forever.
too. We
Takes
do
forever.
too.
we
Yeah.
do own it, that's
Okay.
the good news, okay. And and then the process again for the folks at home, if in fact it doesn't work out, you can't begin to get work on it until town meeting vote, is that the?
Correct.
Right.
We're not gonna, spend, money,
Right,
doing all those sorts of things if it's gonna be all for naught, so.
okay.
But they'll be ready to go as soon as
Yeah,
that.
I mean, we've,
He's
those
ready
horses
now.
are in the, waiting for the bell to ring.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, and I would assume that this was prepared by a lawyer, so it's all legal
Correct.
and
Yep.
ready to go?
It
Okay.
was and it is.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for providing me I was having, what is it, George H.W. Bush, a vision problem with the vision thing previously, just kind of picturing where it was in the lot, and thank you for providing that for me and the language, which gives me a lot more comfort about figuring out where yours ends and ours begins, and so on and so forth. And as you know, I think this is a terrific place for it. My only concern would be if, I don't know, town meeting may think, this is great, go for it. They may wonder if they would like to have a better picture of the project itself before turning the land over. I don't know. In many ways, the advisory committee is an excellent sounding board. Their purpose is to ferret out whatever they think town meeting like to know before that. So I would feel fine about approving this and sending this on to the advisory committee for their conversation, because they're a broader group and they will do a really good job trying to figure out what it is town meeting needs to nail down in order to feel comfortable doing this. But I think this is a great location, and I'm all comfortable with the lot and everything now, so.
And just a follow-up, the discussion we had last time was about the current property, and that, are you gonna keep that?
Cushing?
Cushing Street, yeah.
I fully expect that once, we get this built, and we're not gonna need it. I'm not looking to hold on to it as, we've turned other pieces of property over to the town when we've been through with it, and I fully expect to do the same here.
But that doesn't remind me about, you mentioned, Ted, last week, that the light plant can't actually hold land? How does this work?
Yeah, it doesn't hold title, yeah, the light plant doesn't hold title to the real estate.
Correct.
But we own the buildings.
Okay, so
So
So,
we declare that surplus, just the way you're declaring
This parcel.
the parcel
Okay.
here on surplus, and that would go back to,
and yet the title to the land doesn't change.
title, I think, is still in the town.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's
So
just the nature of the 164 entity that the light plant is.
yes, okay.
It has the right to build utilities, but it doesn't.
Doesn't have the right to own the
To own
land.
property, which is why we, last year for the T, the easement with the T,
Yeah, we had
same
to come
thing,
here,
you know,
yeah.
the
okay.
title to that easement is with the town.
So if all works well, then for the 2014 town meeting, we would look for a warrant article where they would declare surplus and turn back.
Whatever they're not
Hopefully.
Yeah,
using.
whatever that
Oh,
process
right.
is. I
Yeah,
don't
but
even
you
know if
won't,
they
but
did.
you won't be done by, I mean, you won't be out of Cushing Street by
Maybe
town
late,
meeting.
The
maybe
Lincoln-
late
The Lincoln Street
14.
lease is up at the end of 2014. So
So we're-
Okay, that's a
town
good
meeting would be
timeline.
in April, so I
Maybe
think by
215.
the end of that, or
Yeah, maybe 2
maybe the
years.
following spring.
Maybe
we
15.
probably
Yeah,
could.
it'd take
Yeah,
2
I mean,
years.
there's certainly some fire licking at our feet to make it happen quick.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or
No, I'm
comments?
okay.
Any
No, I'm
questions or
okay.
comments from the public on this article before we make a recommendation to the advisory committee? Okay,
I'll make a motion
Surplus.
that we declare the land surplus. I think that's a separate motion, I understand?
Yeah.
this parcel as described in the.
As described in the
article.
proposed warrant article to be surplus.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great,
I move we recommend to the advisory committee Article EE as described in the attachment we received last night, and that's the transfer.
Actually, this came from Light Plant Council, so we'll just make sure that our council agrees with it. So you're just actually gonna vote to support
Transfer.
the article.
Okay.
we'll support the
transfer.
article,
language.
whatever the language, the legal language.
Then I
might turn out
move
to
we
be.
recommend to the advisory committee the transfer of land in the former school tract 4 to the Hingham Municipal Light Plant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much,
Great,
gentlemen.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
being able to be here. I'm sorry, it was a difficult.
Oh, that's fine, thanks.
Thanks very much.
Okay. The next article we're going to discuss is amending the general bylaw relative to allowing the Recreation Commission to appoint a member of the Community Preservation Committee. Anybody here from the Recreation Commission who's going, oh, there you are. Mr. Jones, please. Please join us.
And Paul. Paul, why don't you come up too?
I took Sue's last 2 push pins. I promised her I'd bring them back.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay, this is the second time we've discussed this, and we took it under advisement the last time we discussed it. Anything you'd like to add to the discussion before we begin our discussion?
Just that, now since the law has been amended, where you can use the CPC funds, or CPA funds, excuse me, for recreation, the board itself, the Recreation Board, took a vote, and we felt that it was prudent that we have a member on there that represents recreation, whereas the other parties that are there do have members that do represent their concerns. So where we are voted in by the town, we are elected by the town, we feel as though it would be prudent that we did have a member on there to represent our needs and what we're looking for.
Right, so we looked at, we also looked at behavior. What was the behavior of other towns regarding CPC funds for recreation? And all the surrounding towns and the towns that we compare ourselves to actively use funds, CPC funds, for recreation. It makes sense. It benefits lots of people in the town. And so we felt that since that's our focus, is recreation, that we'd best represent that position on the CPC. So I'd like to add one other thing, which is, in addition to not, in addition to seeing other towns aggressively use their funds for recreation, we saw that Hingham did not use its funds for recreation, mostly for historical preservation. And we think that's fine, but we think it should be balanced, that's all.
Comments?
I'll repeat the same comment. Did anybody talk to Mike Puzo?
No, I haven't.
I haven't.
I don't know why he's asking.
There are two seats. For the benefit of the folks at home, there are, Mr. Puzo appoints two people, and we appoint two people, plus the selectmen have a seat. So the question that town meeting would ask is, where does it come from?
Well, I'll go back to the same thing when we had the meeting before, and I'll say, it's between the selectman and the moderator. If you're asking me, I would like to have the selectman seat. Right now, if you look at it, with the selectmen being appointed, because there is no parks department within the town, the selectmen are, by virtue, appointed that seat. So doing so, if you do that, if you also turn around and look at the selectmen have two other appointments, there's 1/3 of the board that the selectmen control. And those two appointments are at the will of the selectmen. So I would like to see that one of them, one of those three appointments, one of those three selectmen, two appointments by the selectmen and one by virtue of the law, that at least one of those would be turned around and be given to recreation. So I would like to see it come from recreation. If you're asking me where it comes from, that's where I'd like to have it come from. The night that we did have the discussion, we first talked about it, I made the statement that I didn't really care where it came from as long as we have a point. The more I looked at it and more I examined it, with the selectmen having three positions on that board, I think the selectmen are the one that it should come from.
Right, and we also, again, looked at other towns and how they do it, and they appoint somebody that has recreation sort of as their mandate. And I think, as a Board of Selectmen, you should worry more about the oversight and creating balance in the town as opposed to trying to keep central command and control over something like that. And I think, again, go back to the behavior. What has been the behavior? The behavior has been funds have not gone to recreation, which is the intent of the state and the intent of...
In the change that they made.
Well,
We followed the
right,
law
'cause-
before.
right,
That's
because
why
you
they
know
made
what?
the change.
Right.
You know what's curious to me, though, there's a chapter that governs this, and I think it's 44B, if my memory serves me right, and I don't know why the state didn't change the statute to make sure that the conditions that currently exist, identifying, as you referenced, a parks commissioner, why wouldn't they have added a recreation person instead?
Because they use it, it's used as a general, each town is organized a little bit differently, and they use that in a very general sense when we talk to them. Parks Commission is Boston calls it the Parks and Recreation Department, right? Other towns call it other things, but the closest thing for Hingham to something that's akin to that is the Recreation Department, the Recreation Commission.
That's not what town council told us.
I know
Yes, I
that,
know
but
Well,
they're paid.
that's two town councils
Right.
told us that.
Right. So, again, that's their opinion. They're lawyers. They have their own opinions when they look at those things. But we're looking at it in terms of the interests of the people in Hingham, and we're saying, hey, we're not spending money on recreation facilities. A good example would be this year, by pushing really hard on this, it looks like we might get approval for a little bit of money to go to a local playground, right? That benefits a whole neighborhood. Fixing a fence along Main Street is important, but I don't think it benefits that many people. And again, the whole point of this is to create some balance and give recreation a voice on the commission. And I think that's the whole point. We can look at the legal side of this thing. I guess you can spend a lot of money on lawyers, but in my view, this is all about taking those funds and having them benefit more people and having them benefit recreation. That's a big part of why people move to Hingham. They move here for the schools, and they move here for the recreation and the youth programs. And we can't do that if the money's all locked up in historical preservation. And that's not what happens in other towns.
That's not where the money is locked up.
Well, again, we look at the history of it, and we look at monies have not been put into recreation in Hingham through CPC. They just haven't, so.
The other thing, that you did reference 44B, and it also says there in 44B that all departments performing like duties. And if you look at the mandate from the statute from the state regarding the Parks Department, right now Hingham Recreation performs 4 out of the 5 duties that the Park Department, that if you look at the statute for the Park Department, does. So 4 out of the 5 duties, I would say we're performing like duties of that department.
Yeah,
But I understand what you're saying, that you turn around and you say that that's what the town council has said. I'm just referencing what you have said, that also we perform 4 out of the 5 duties. If you're there and now that there's money available, everybody else that has money available, the other 4 departments that have money, agencies that have money available to them, have a representative on the board that is appointed by the board, by their members, that is there to ensure that they are represented fairly on that board. That's what we were asking for. I don't think it's that much of a leap for the selectmen to sit there and say, you know what, you have a good issue, you have your members there, you are there to receive funds, you should have represented. I don't think it's that much of a leap to have a permanent member put on that board.
Okay. What's wrong with the current arrangement?
The current arrangement right now is I, as chairman, I'm on the board. I was appointed by the selectmen, by you, to be on that board. We cannot, it's taken out of our hands who we want to have placed on that board. Is any other board, any other party who was on that is appointed by their board, represented by their board, all right? There are other people that wanted the job, but they're just too busy at the time, so I stepped forward and took the job. I appreciated being on the CPC. It's a great board. I enjoy being there. But there are other members that would like to have been on that board that were not allowed to be on that board. So we are saying we should be able, as an elected board, elected by the people who elect us, be able to operate as we wish to operate. Right now, with the budget that we have from the town, as Paul alluded to, right now we didn't get any money, we haven't got any money from the CPC. Until last year, we did get money for historic reasons to shore up the bond, to maintain the bond in the status that it is. We are looking for money this year, and hopefully the money will come. It is favorable coming from the CPC. They are favorable to us. But we are looking to do something like that, whereas other towns have already, and other towns have their own members on the board. It's not a big leap, but that's all we're asking for.
I'm done.
I'm gonna, excuse me, support Frank. On the 9-member board right now, the selectmen control 3 seats. It is very rare for a selectman to be sitting on any kind of board or committee. The only one that makes sense to me is the Housing Trust, and that's very different than the CPC. So I think, and it's up to the advisory committee to recommend, but I would do away with the selectman seat and give that one to the Rec Commission. I talked at length to a lady at the CPA whose name escapes me right now. I don't think I've had enough coffee. But I've talked to her 3 or 4 times and gave her the history of how our Parks Department was done away with, and they went for the tree part, they went to the DPW, but Recreation does perform 4 out of 5 tasks. So I think this is a very worthy warrant article. Now that CPA has changed, I think Recreation, like the other boards, should have a member chosen by them to sit on the CPC.
May I just also add, we've gone in front of advisory, and advisory was very favorable to us. So most of the boards that we've gone with advisory, they are favorable to this action.
Well, as you know, I favor this, but as I see the way the article is written now, what it will do is turn the committee into a 10-member committee. It doesn't specify eliminating one of the other seats. It only specifies adding.
It does.
Did I?
Yes, it does.
Substitute, where it says substitute,
Where does it say substitute?
striking.
By striking paragraph?
6
Okay.
of section 1 and substituting this.
Well, what is paragraph 6, section 1 say then, if I may inquire?
Hang
Because
on
I
a
was
sec.
confused. I thought this just added.
To add one other thing, here. Okay, 1 in paragraphs, the number 1, member of the Board of Selectmen as designated by that board for an initial term of 1 year and thereafter a term of 3 years. And that would be substituted.
Okay, I don't care for that, because as I understand it, the way we're currently set up, the law requires the Board of Selectmen to have a member, because we're the Parks Commissioners. So that's not working for me. I'm somewhat agnostic on whether the seat, if you choose to make it into a 9-member board, whether the seat comes from the selectmen or the moderators, and I'd be perfectly happy to let the advisory committee make that decision. I think it's wise to have a 9-member board. And so, but I do not favor getting rid of the selectman position, because I don't think legally we can do that, actually. the way it's been described to me since we're the Parks Commissioner. So that part is not working for me. So we might come up with some formulation of our own vote to send our recommendation on to advisory committee, but I do not think that we should eliminate the selectman seat itself unless we change who the Parks Commissioners are or something like that, which I'm not contemplating, so, because I don't think that's legal. So that's not working for me. I do support having a member of the Recreation Commission appointed by the Recreation Commission on the Community Preservation Committee. And I'll just pass on to you that at an event at the town forum yesterday, somebody who's a distinguished former member of the Community Preservation Committee came up to me and complimented the current Recreation Commission members' participation on community preservation, said it's been terrific and really happy to have that member on the board, so that's working out really well. So I'm glad that's a positive thing going forward. I have to say though, although I support this, I'm really actually quite troubled at the rationale that you're putting forward for it, because in fact, my view of it is that what we want is someone appointed by the Recreation Commission who has expertise in these areas to give to the committee in evaluating proposals that come forward. The Community Preservation Committee does not actually originate projects. Projects come from outside the committee. They come to the committee, and it's valuable to the committee to have expertise in the various areas that the grants are in. And so it makes sense that, assuming that there would be recreation projects coming forward, that there would be somebody on the committee to offer that expertise. But I would not like to see a committee where the people who are there to advocate for their own little thing over against everybody else's own little thing. And that would disturb me if it turned into a place where people are saying, well, we didn't get enough of this last year, and we, meaning not the Community Preservation Committee, which is what you're sitting on at that moment, but your little constituency who you represent. Each of these people on the board represents some piece of what the Community Preservation Committee is in charge of. And, I will just, you mentioned the Housing Authority membership on the board. The Housing Authority is on the board statutorily because we have one, and the Community Preservation article was adopted in Hingham, I think, in 2001. No community preservation dollars have ever gone to the Housing Authority. Every dollar that's been spent on housing that's gone to another agency has gone to the Affordable Housing Trust, which has no representative on the board. So, and that may be a historical accident, I don't know, because we adopted the Affordable Housing Trust after we adopted the community preservation. There wasn't any at that time. And who would have been the choice representative, Housing Authority, Housing Trust, I don't know. That's a what if. But in fact, the Housing Authority has never received any money from CPC. That doesn't mean they shouldn't. They should. I really, really would like to. So far, we haven't been able to make it work out, but I really would like them to have it. But I just wish. I'm disturbed by the rationale it's offered. I don't think that people are on the committee to advocate in particular for their own particular area. They're there to think about what's best for the town and offer their expertise when projects in their area come forward. And in fact, I think didn't you tell me, Ted, I don't know, that there's an informal practice of people on the committee not actually voting when things in their area come forward, so that people, somebody it's not required, but they have an informal practice that when something historical comes forward, the people in the representing historical entities don't vote, so that they're not seen as advocating for their own area over against it. So that's the basis on which I support this, but I hope you have a different, and I gather it's been going really well, Mr. Jones, with you on the board, and that it's a great addition, and I hope that continues, but I hope that what you're not coming at it planning to put yourself against other members of the board and arguing for dollars for your area, because that's not how everybody else is coming to that committee.
No, and in response to what you were saying, first of all, there's only, the statute is only 5 to 9 members could be on the board, so we can't have 10.
Yeah, okay.
My meaning of when I say a selectman's position, not necessarily the selectman himself. Parks, I would like to see the Parks Department, but the appointed position. Also, if you have somebody with expertise, if you're talking when it comes to certain areas, if there's nobody on the board who represents recreation, who is going to be there to answer any questions, if you want to say, for the expertise of it? So
Right, I'm all
that's-
for, that's what I'm for.
Right, that's what we're
That's
looking
I'm in
at, to
favor of
have
that.
somebody there, not to necessarily advocate saying, we want X amount of money, stand there and stomp your feet. That's not the attitude of the members of the Recreation Board. We are there to offer what we have for it, the same as I have done for the last 4 or 5 months since I've been on the board, when they have questions regarding the recreation. So that's what we are there for. I'm not saying we want somebody to stand there and stomp their feet and say, we want X amount of dollars because so-and-so got X amount of dollars. That's not what it's all about. But I would like to see, like I said, whereas the statute said, and Mr. Rebuffo is related to, that 2 town councils have said that there should be a member from the selectmen due to Parks and Recreation. But you also have 2 appointments that are there. That's what I would like to look at. I would like to have one of those appointments become a permanent appointment within the, for the recreation.
Yeah, I can see that our perspicacious Assistant Town Administrator is finding the part that would be struck by this article. It's
Yeah, that's what I showed you.
paragraph 6, section 1. So,
Section 1.
section 1,
2, 3,
1,
4,
2,
5.
1,
It's the one
2,
I
3,
showed you.
4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 1, 2, is this a that's all part of a
Yes.
paragraph. It's actually technically all one paragraph, so that's a problem.
It's
1, 2,
that
3,
one,
4, 5,
5,
6. Okay, this article strikes the part that puts a member of the Board of Selectmen on, so that's not so good. It would have to be something else, so perhaps we'll send that on to the advisory committee to fix, however they, don't support that.
I
also just, my last comment before I turn it back over is I also just want to point out that the bulk of the funds have not gone to historic preservation. They've gone to open space, which is a different,
That's right.
area.
I just want to emphasize again, I was happy that the legislature clarified the recreational issue, because that was, as you know, Frank, that was the reason they didn't. But I also want to, and this is going to sound crazy coming from me, but they amended the statute to include recreation, but they didn't amend the statute in terms of membership. And there must have been a reason for that. So I would bow to that wisdom, and if they said, yes, if you have a recreation and/or a parks commissioner, you should have that. They didn't do that. And when I checked with a state representative, they said they intentionally didn't do that. So I'm of a mind not to support this. And I would recommend to advisory that we do not do this, but that we continue the practice that we've established of inviting a member of the recreation to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
Can we get just that question, if you're saying that he said that they intentionally did he give you a reason why they intentionally?
Again, I think, can I say something?
Certainly.
At least, our understanding is they're not trying to be prescriptive, and it's not that they didn't do it because they just don't want to get into how local towns define things and so on. And so we sort of we don't want to get into the nitpicking of how they wrote those laws. We're looking at it as people and saying, yes, expertise is important, but representation is important. And representation, not necessarily, is it advocacy? Of course it's a little bit of advocacy. We're elected as rec commissioners. But to work effectively on a board, you've got to work with the people who have different interests. So it's not to put your foot down and say, it's our way or the highway. It's to just make sure that people with knowledge of recreation in the town are participating, and there's some balance to what happens out of that committee. That's all. And so that's where we're coming from on this. It's not. I think we've proven as a board, particularly in the last few years, we've been able to work effectively with people in the town, and that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how do we work, and we've realized that to do that, we've got to engage with other committees and do the things that help make the right things happen. So, and that process seems to be working. We just like to have it so that we can do it as part of our doing our business. We don't have to come to special meetings and appeal to say, can we please be on the CPC and that sort of thing. If it's automatic, then it happens. You've got recreation expertise as part of it, and I think from a balance perspective, you'll see the town make the right decisions as far as where the CPC funds go.
You make a good point, and I don't, but to the point Laura just made, we don't have a seat for the housing folks, either authority or trust.
Housing authority.
Trust.
Housing authority,
On
yes,
the
we
C-
do.
On the CPC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we
But-
do.
But the issue has been, we haven't given the housing trust a seat on the board, and my fear is that we start going down a road where we suddenly have the 9 seats are going to be representatives of all the various departments with special interests.
Okay, but we're saying is, other towns have recreation representation on their boards, and if you look at their funding, they have put more funds into their recreation projects, okay, so that's all we're saying. And
Our biggest problem is housing, as Laura just said. That's our.
Right, but there's
that's-
other sources of funding for housing. I just moved into a development which is 40B, and so the developer funds $500,000 per unit for for affordable housing. I mean, so we don't have that available to us from a recreation standpoint. So capital improvements can happen in housing other ways. There's other funds, there's other sources, and maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert in it, but it seems to me there's other sources, and there aren't other sources. It's a major source in these towns, CPC funds for recreation.
And that's one of the things on the CPC is that, is there other sources available for the different agencies that are coming in looking for the CPA money? So that's one of the things on the CPC that we look at. Recreation, there isn't. 4 years ago, the town said that we'll give you $30,000 a year to build playgrounds. Well, when the previous town administrator was there, he cut our budget by 30%, that was gone. So we haven't been able to build any playgrounds, excuse me, for the last 4 years. This is the first year that we were able to, if it does go through and it is voted favorable, this is the first time in 4 years, it'll be almost 5 by the time it's done, that we'll be able to build any playgrounds in the town. Our sources from the town, as you know, the only money we do get from the town is the director's salary. That's the only money that we do get. Anything else is what we generate ourselves throughout our budget in the revolving fund. So the CPA right now is a source of funds that we can get because, as you know, you sit there, the town is strapped for money. So that's available funds that we are getting. That's why we're asking for a seat to be there, so we can answer these questions that are there to help make decisions on the board and have a permanent one where we are a town, again, I say a town elected, we're elected by the members of by the citizens of the town. So I feel as though if we're elected by the citizens of the town, we should have a seat on there. Housing Authority does have a seat on there. Historical has a seat on there. Open Space has a seat on there. But we are elected by the town members, so I believe that we should have a seat, a permanent seat on there, and be able to elect them who we want on there by ourselves.
I'm going to echo what Frank says. The Rec Commission is an elected body. They should have the ability to determine who they would like to sit on the CPC. It should not be controlled by the Selectmen. The Selectmen right now on a 9-member board control 3 seats. If you don't like what the Rec does, vote them out of office. But they should have control over who goes on boards, just as some of our other elected boards. 2 town councils have given an opinion. The second town council gave the same opinion, but then in the closing, and I would ask that anyone interested, please ask for that document, said, you can do what you want. So if you want to put a Recreation Commission member dedicated to recreation on there, by all means do it. Over 60 cities and towns, and I think I'm right on those numbers, have a recreation member as a permanent member of the CPC. So I think in the interest of fairness, we should have a permanent member. It should be elected by an elected board. Let them pick the person they want on the commission.
Do you have
on
a
the
copy
CPC.
of the council's opinion?
I don't have it with me. Yes, Bruce?
I haven't seen that, and that's the first I've heard it. Let me ask the town administrator.
Yeah, I can get you a copy. We have had it for a couple months. It's in our files.
Somebody in the audience has it if you'd like to see it. Dick Ennis has it.
Just a clarification point, what council said was that we couldn't touch the the statutory position by the Selectmen of Parks Commission, but Selectman Lauder is correct in that we could do whatever the Selectmen could do whatever they want with the remaining 2 appointment positions they have. Or actually, the town could do whatever they want with the remaining 2 appointment positions.
So then I'm back to my first article. Have we talked to the moderator? He has 2.
Well, yes, absolutely. It could be ours or it could be his.
Could be
if we did
his.
this.
That's right.
Those are the ones that are available. I just want to go on record as saying that I have been so impressed with the work of the Community Preservation Committee over the years. And I've been so impressed with their attempts at trying to service all of the areas that's covered by the Community Preservation Committee. I do not believe that recreation would get any fewer funds dedicated to recreation from the Community Preservation Committee if you never had a representative. I just don't believe that. I believe that they respond to the projects that come forward to them, and if they're well-designed and if they have community support, they fund them, regardless of what area they're in. And so I actually, to me, it's a little bit of a vote of no confidence in that committee to say, well, we would be devoting more funds to recreation if we had somebody on there. I don't believe that, and I hope that that's not the approach that you take when you go on there, but rather go on to offer your expertise when recreation projects come to you.
And I think the proof, if I may, Frank, the proof of that is what happened this year.
All right. Regarding that, I would like to say, first of all, being on there for the last 5 months, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. It's been a great board. And to say that it'd be a vote of no confidence, absolutely not. And I actually do find that offensive by saying something like that. The board is a great board. They've done fantastic work. The guys that are on there and the women that are on there have done a great job the whole time, putting a lot of time, a lot of effort into that. It's not like they just show up once a month and have their meeting, or twice a month and have their meeting. There's weekends and everything, so there's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I appreciate everything that they've done. As you said, you wanted someone with expertise on there to represent it. We go down the road and we turn around, and for some reason, the selectmen, the board, the selectmen change all the time, but you have 3 appointments, or you have 1 yourself and 2 appointments, so you control one-third of the board. If for some reason down the road, something happens and the selectman doesn't like the way things go, all of a sudden you're gone. Now you don't have a voice on that board.
No, I've said what my
That's
position
what
is, but correct me
right.
if I'm wrong. I thought what you just said was that you want a position on this board because other towns are spending more on recreation than we are, and you want to change that. And that's what I'm having a problem with.
No, we're just pointing out that the behavior of our town versus other towns is different. And what we've seen is that other towns have put those funds into recreation. And I don't think it's a matter of the board not wanting to do the best job or doing a great job. I think they do a fabulous job. I think if you have a point of view that's a recreation point of view, recreation get talked about more on the board. That's
Well, do you
just
think
human nature.
more recreation projects will come to the board? Because they don't originate the projects, they come from outside.
I think they
that's an
will, because they
important
come to
point.
us, actually,
Yeah.
in the recreation commitment. People come into us all the time, and they have no clue where to go with
So
these
this link will help you direct
Absolutely.
projects to the
Absolutely.
board.
Yes.
As you say, the people come in all the time, as Paul alluded to, this is where the playground project came from.
Right.
Bradley Park came to us and said, could you help us out? We're willing to donate money, to give money from their association to get this thing moving. They're the ones that came to us and asked, and that's why we're looking to put it in Bradley Park. That's where it came from. They're the ones that
Okay.
started it.
I understand that now. That makes complete sense, that it's just increasing the lines of communication so that everybody understands how this process
Right,
works.
they had over
And
200 people
also-
sign the petition asking us to do it, who wrote letters, so that's why we're looking to put one there first.
And then you'll have somebody who can explain the project and explain the cost of the project, both short-term and long-term. But you'll have an expert.
Well, we have that today. The Heritage Museum is a prime example. It wasn't the Historical Commission that put that forward. It was the Historical Society, which does not have a seat. And the first time they came, they were tabled because they hadn't done all their homework. And they went back, and as you know, there's an article dealing with that issue now. And it was because of the research that they did and the support they solicited to make this project move forward. And that's why it's on the ballot this year. So I think the argument of having somebody there from a particular organization it takes away the purpose, as Laura has said, in the CPC.
I'll argue that the Historical Society is a private organization, all right? And they do have, and there is a position for historical on the board. So they're a private organization who came to historical, and then it is there on that.
But
Same
the
as-
solicited, but the proposal for the project came from, as to Laura's point, it came not from the Historical Commission, it came from the people. And these same things would still occur. That's the reason for the CPC.
It
It's a
came from the
ground
people
up.
under the Historical Society, who was a private organization, whereas ours came from, and I'm sorry to say, I did say Bradley Park, I meant to say Bradley Woods, I apologize.
I do that all the time.
I did apologize. It came from Bradley Woods, who are the citizens who wanted this. So we're on the same page. You're talking the same thing.
Well,
You
that's why I'm
just
saying it
mixing apples and
takes the
oranges.
argument, what it does for me is that argument is moot. It doesn't matter. If the CPC is doing its work, the projects can come in now in any of 4 categories to be considered, and that's what they do. And what happened this year is recreation, in terms of number of projects, got a lot more, and yet again, in the instance of housing, we are way behind the 10% requirement of our funds that we were supposed to do. And by the way, the legislature didn't give a percentage that they wanted for recreation. They just said, we want to clarify the law so that you could do things for recreation that previously the statute didn't permit. It's very simple.
You're absolutely right. I don't argue that point. I'm arguing that we have a position on the board. That's what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing the point of what the legislature did. We all know that certain percentages do go to the designated.
They didn't give the percentage to recreation.
You're 100% right. That's exactly what I was going to say. Once those are fulfilled, those 10% to each one of those, any funds then could be used for recreation, as they are right now, with the recreation department and also going to the school department. There's also one on there for $50,000 for the new field.
Yeah.
So it's not just it is recreation, but not just the recreation department.
But it does, as you know, under the statute, the money for housing has to be set aside until we get to our affordability.
Right, and that it is. And you know yourself, Bruce, it's set aside every year.
That's
The-
right.
The commission does.
Okay, I think we
So-
pretty well covered the waterfront here.
So
there-
is it safe to say that there'll be a spirited discussion at advisory?
Possibly. Is there anybody who would like to speak? Yes.
Richard Innes, 29 Lincoln Street. I'm still on the advisory committee, and I'm charged with the responsibility of drafting a comment before tomorrow night's advisory committee meeting. I would like to see the latest version of the article. The last one I saw, and the only one I've seen, I think was done in early January.
I think that's the only one, January 9th. I'm not aware there's
I found that
another
one
one.
confusing, and I was hoping that there had been some refinement.
Well, did the advisory committee vote to support the article?
We haven't heard it. We hear it tomorrow.
Oh,
Tomorrow night.
then I thought you said the advisory committee was supported this article, but they haven't even heard it yet.
Well, the members what we're talking to,
The members that you're talking to, okay, so, but we don't actually know what the full committee's going to think. Well, I will hope that if we, that when you do take it up, if you do support it, that you'll fix the little problem about the,
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if
about it
someone
being
else had
illegal.
fixed it.
Well, it says draft to be finalized by town council as recommended by Betty Foley. Is this the only one we have so far?
yeah, I think
Right,
that's the
that's
okay.
the one I have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys, if it passes, you guys get to pick the slot.
Is there anybody else has comment or question on this before we move on? Okay, well, I would entertain a motion in that case.
I'll recommend that I move that we recommend to the advisory committee Article T, amending the general bylaw with respect to member of the Recreation Commission appointed to CPC.
Okay, can't support that because Article T
Okay.
is illegal, so let's make a general recommendation.
I move that we recommend to the advisory committee that the general bylaw be amended to include a permanent member of the Recreation Commission appointed to the CPC. Better?
Yes, I'm good with that. I'll second that. I assume you're not going to second that.
That's correct.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No?
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Now, I am wondering if, rather than make the recreation folks hang around until after the discussion of the school stuff, that we should discuss your other article now, so that you don't have to stay.
Thank you.
This article, FF, is a proposal to turn the athletic fields that are under the control of the Board of Selectmen over to the Recreation Commission. And we've been having a long conversation about this. A year ago, the Board of Selectmen signed a management agreement with the Recreation Commission to have them manage the fields that the Board of Selectmen control, and with the thought that this article would come forward and that we would consider turning the fields over to them. And so I wonder if you have anything to say before we make comments.
Oh, okay, I thought you were going to go first. Okay, so, no,
I'll just go on the history of it.
okay.
Oh, go ahead, you're ready.
You don't have to
Okay.
say anything, but I was hoping you would.
And again, I'm probably going to, I'm going to talk about this not from a legal perspective, and I know a lot of what you look at is from a legal perspective. I just look at it in terms of, I'm looking at this one from initially we looked at it in terms of managing the fields. We should own the fields, manage the fields. That's what happens happens in most communities. The Recreation Department has fields. They're protected by statute by the state, probably for a lot of reasons. I don't even know why, but other than to protect them for recreation purposes, I would imagine. But in the case of Hingham, we've seen that that there's a lot of development in the town, and recreation facilities or fields end up become almost bargaining chips in some of these negotiations. And as the town develops and you have big developers like Lennar and car dealers and big retailers come into this town and build up the town, I'm very concerned about protecting recreation fields and not having them be under the control of the selectmen, because you're in a position to use everything at your disposal to negotiate things on behalf of the town. And I understand that. That's your role. You should do that as well as you can. But from a recreation standpoint, I think the fields should be preserved, the recreation facilities should be preserved, and the best way to preserve those is to move the ownership of those, the titles to those, to the Recreation Department's control, as is done throughout the Commonwealth, and as the Commonwealth legislates. We created legislation around this to protect these fields, basically so that kids have a place to go play and they don't get turned over to someone to build a big retailer or a big housing tract development. So that's how I view it. It's not, and again, I'm not. You're probably going to say that you would not take that in consideration if you controlled the land. If it was a field used by kids, you wouldn't sell it to a developer. I'm not saying you would do that. I'm just saying that protections are built in for obvious reasons, and that's and so we'd like you to do the right thing and take recreation facilities and fields and make them protect them under recreation. That's all. Right, and there's some history to this, Frank wants to.
Yeah, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been going over this. It was brought forward, and Bruce, you asked us to come forward on this because there was some problems with the fields, that the management of the fields, the schedule in the fields, and there weren't enough fields in town. So there was going to be a study done of all the fields in town and what was going on, who owns what was owned by the school, what were owned by the selectmen, what was owned by recreation. So we could have one plan. At some point in time, the school fields were cut out of it, and it was just the selectmen and our fields. Bruce, I'll go with one of those sayings that you had is that the selectmen do not belong in recreation. We like to do something about this. So you asked us to sign an agreement at the time, which we did, the first agreement that we signed, and was unanimous on our board to sign the agreement with the understanding that at some point in time, these fields would be turned over. One of the things that you did say, that was just after the Carlson Complex had come online. You wanted to see how we managed it and how we took care of it and what condition the field was in afterwards. Everybody agreed the field was in great condition the following year. It was managed properly. There were no complaints. People got playing time. It was all scheduled through our office. So he turned around, waited, and he said, well, we'd like to go another year. So we did. We signed the agreement last year, and it was with the understanding that we would, at this year's town meeting, that the fields would be turned over to us. I know there is some problem with that now, that you step forward and say that you don't want to do this because of certain things. Because when I sat down last week with Ted, he was saying it came to light that now that there's Article 97, that the fields, for them to be turned over, for us to be turned over, you have to declare a surplus. We accept them, it goes to the town meeting, vote favorable town meeting, then it goes to the legislature. When it goes to the legislature, they vote on it, and now it becomes recreation. For that to be turned back, it has to go the opposite, that you'd have to do that. And it was conveyed to me at that meeting that you were reluctant to do that because of something, if you wanted to get that land back for whatever reason. I don't find a problem with that, due to the fact that it's already been done once before. For the Habitat Humanity House over here on Central Street, that's exactly what the town did prior to it. Bruce, I don't know if you were on the board at that time, but that's exactly what they did. They went, that was recreation property, they went to the town meeting, got it released, went to the legislature, and had it turned back over. So there's not a problem with that. I don't understand where everybody's kind of pushed back on that. The fields themselves are in great shape. We've done a great job managing them. We are recreation. That's our job, to manage the fields. I don't understand why now, at this time when we sit here, and to say that it just came to light this year that that's the way the process works. I've been telling every member of the board since I've been coming up here for the last 4 or 5 years with this is exactly how the process works. So to sit there and say now that it came to light last week or the week prior to that, that this is how this process works, I don't understand it, because I've sat there and said many times, this is how this process works.
Frank, I have never heard you say that these lands automatically go into Chapter 97 when they go. That is the new piece of information for me.
I can't say it was Chapter 9. I didn't know the exact one, Laura, the exact chapter at the time, but I told her how the process works, that we had to go to town meeting, we had to get accepted and go to the legislature, and for you to get it back, it would go to reverse. I didn't quote the chapter or everything at that time, but that's exactly how I said it.
Okay?
Not just on one occasion, on numerous
Okay,
occasions.
I'm going to confess I don't remember that. I'm going to confess that.
And I don't either. So we must have been at different meetings.
Well, I don't know. I'm getting old. I don't remember a lot of stuff, so I'm going to confess that I don't remember that.
Oh,
Just
Laura.
for purposes of, so as clarification, should we say what fields we're talking about here? We're not talking about
Sure.
the specific fields that the selectmen control, that we manage, schedule, operate, and those are the fields we're talking about. So it's
Beale Street, Powers in the center, the new Ward Street field, which is in the back of Margaret's Field, and
Carlson.
Carlson Complex.
And the driving range.
Well, in the driving range. So those are the five different parcels in the land. I don't see somewhere down the road ever taking Carlson Complex and you have to build on it or do something, put a fire station or a piece of town property on there. Powers Field, I can't see them somewhere down the road wanting to do something in the middle of the historic district in downtown Hingham. Beale Street, all right, it's near commercial property. Maybe somewhere down the road you might want that. That was under our control for over 30 years. We did have control of that recreation department. Then at some point in time, someone decided that when Mr. Hastings wanted to do a land swap to put his condos back there, that all of a sudden, oh, the selectmen own it, we're taking it back. So we had it for 30 years, and all of a sudden, it's gone. So you could see why, at some point in time, we're kind of hesitant to say, we're going to sign these leases, but all of a sudden, they could get taken back. But Beale Street was. That was not declared recreation property, and I don't know the whole particulars when the feds turned it over to, I knew it was supposed to be for recreation and enjoyment, but I don't know all the particulars on that, so I'm not going to go into that. But that was managed by recreation for over 30 years. But that was taken back for the land swap in a field that was to be built.
Okay, I'm going to break tradition here, and before I ask my colleagues, because I'd just like to respond to what you just said, because I was a little, I hate to do this, but I like to push back a little bit on the rationale that you offered for this, even though I've been in favor of this. That if you look at the reason that we took back control so that we could make a deal with Mr. Hastings was in order to get $2 million worth of investment into recreation. When the Board of Selectmen makes a deal with developers, it doesn't generally go against recreation. That one of the things that we hope to do when we invite development into town is to invite the developers to contribute to their community, whether it be a fire station, whether it be recreation, but we have a track record of making these deals very much to the advantage of recreation, not against it. So, if you have concerns about that. I'm not sure that they're justified by the past.
No, I'm not alluding to. What I'm saying is, what the point that I'm making is that it was recreation field.
Yes, I understand that.
And
But
Mr. Hastings came in
Paul
and did.
said that he was worried about this, and I'm suggesting
No.
maybe there's no basis for worry, because that's not
No,
what
he
the
did
town's
put a
approach
field
has
in
been.
there. He did build a field that's in there and had lights, which, big thing in this town, lights, as we all know. There is one thing that when they did build it, and you could ask the people right now that have the lease on it, the Hingham Youth Football and Little League, the amount of money that they've had to put into that field because of the shoddy work that did go into it.
Well, we're aware of that, but do you wish that we hadn't done that?
No, I probably wish that at the time that,
That we
that
had done a
recreation
better
could have
job
been,
keep-
yeah, the
keeping
recreation
track.
could have been consulted and say, what do you think about how this field's going and what's going on? Because they have put a substantial amount of funds, and I'm sure you're aware of how much it is to go, to try to correct that field and do something with it.
Okay, so I was speaking only to the intentions of when the board wants to have flexibility with the lands, what the board's intentions might be, and to give it away, to have a housing development put on it, has never been the board's intention, and I doubt ever would be, to replace a playing field with a development for some reason. I can't, but I'll turn it over to my
Just one
colleague.
thing, the lease that we now have with the two sports groups, and they put about $40,000 a year into that field, just so everybody knows. And we thank them for it, because the town doesn't have it to do. That lease will then be between the Recreation Commission and the sports groups, and the two groups will get along very, very well. I know they will.
Okay, I got out of order here, so I'll turn
That's
it over
okay.
here for your
We can share.
comments.
This has been going on now 2 years, and I remember it being talked about when I sat on advisory, which seems like eons ago. It needs to get done. All these questions that are coming up at the 11th hour, the work should have started a year ago. I can't change that, but I think we need to move forward, to move the fields to recreation. And however, the warrant article has to be structured. And I know we've got some good people working on it. It needs to be done to get it over to recreation so that they can then start doing some fundraising to try and improve the fields and put some enhancements in them. So I am for this article.
Okay.
The current article is not correct, because it doesn't delineate the fields to be transferred. And secondly, the school committee has correctly preserved their right to, for their purposes, to retain control of the land under their jurisdiction as prescribed by statute.
No one's taking theirs away.
That's exactly right, and they have done that. And the third issue is the letter that we received from council indicating the process we have to go through to get it back if we should ever need it. And while we say here comfortably that we hope that would never happen, we would be giving away something that is under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen to a board that doesn't have overall responsibility for the town that we have. And moreover, there are the process we have to go through to have this, as we already described, is to have the state legislature involved, and in the case of one of the fields, we'd have to go to the Department of Interior, which, by the way, we are in discussions with on another matter. So the arrangement we have, and I thought the arrangement, since I was responsible to try to bring together a cohesive plan for the management of the fields, was, I thought, working very well, because it helped the schools, it helped the selectmen, and it helped the Recreation Commission in order to manage a very valuable pieces of property. And it brought cohesion. And I thought the agreement we had was working quite well. And I've been called by some people saying not to do this because it's not broken at this juncture, and to give it to you is for what purpose? We can keep that up in the arrangement we currently have. So that's my, I am not voting to support this for that reason, not only the article being incorrect, but also because council is telling me, be very careful if you do this.
Okay, thank you. As you know, I have supported this in the past, And I will confess to not realizing that this process would involve the state up until this week. And my concerns about it are really very practical. I don't think that the Board of Selectmen should be managing fields, and so we've dealt with that, and we've handed the management over. But our experience when land transfers and land control issues involve the state is that that is horrific in terms of reaching the goals that the town wants to reach, even if we're all on the same page. We've certainly had that experience with Bear in Carlson Fields and so forth. And even when we're trying to, when we are trying to put land that's vacant into Chapter 97, we still can't get the cooperation of the state, never mind getting it out. And my concern about this has entirely to do not with the transfer of control to the Recreation Commission, but the transfer of control to the state, which I didn't realize we were involved in. I apologize if you have told us that repeatedly, Frank, because it didn't take it on board. But I don't think it's something to be ignored once I finally figured out that that is actually what we're talking about, because it does make it very difficult for the town to have the flexibility to do what it wants to do. And once again, this has nothing to do with the flexibility I mean, the kinds of issues that we've had are like the little fisheries and wildlife parcel over by the Back River Bridge that we would like to add to Bear Cove Park to make recreation land that we've had forever. It's taken forever to get them involved. Right now we are involved in a discussion about trying to swap a piece of land that's legally in Bear Cove Park up near the road for 4 times as much land that is not in Bear Cove Park but is currently wild back next to Bear Cove Park. To make a swap like that with the state, you'd think they would jump all over that, because we're giving them 4 times as much land and it's actually contiguous with the park. We can't get the legislature to move on that. And that actually is kind of an issue, because this article, if it passed, would interfere with that process, because we would no longer be in control of this. So it would have to go and start all over again. And so the progress that we've made would be lost. We've already been working on this for at least a year. Am I right?
Correct.
At least a year. So once you get the state involved, anything that you want to do with those lands, including what you would want to do, takes years to work out. And this is a very important practical consideration for me. So I understood that your concern about the current arrangement would have to do with not really being willing to make large capital improvements in lands that are not under your control. And that makes complete sense to me. So I would like to ask if you would be open to an extremely long-term management agreement that would give you effective control over everything with the Board of Selectmen, and allow the situation that we have currently, that I think is working, extend practically indefinitely into the future, and not get the state involved in this little transfer of control. I mean, I'd like to find a way to transfer the control of these funds to you, these fields to you, without involving the state, because our experience with that is just, it's never in the town's interest to do that. So that's where I'm coming from right now. So what do you think about that?
Okay, thank you. I don't think it's working well right now. I think that what we see is that people are confused about who controls these fields. And if we're managing the field and somebody wants to do something, we can't make that decision, right? They have to go to the selectmen, or they know that, right? And so we deal with all the youth programs in the town. And right now, it's sort of like, well, maybe if I go to the selectmen, I get a better deal. I can lease this field rather than have to deal with the recreation department. And then it cripples our ability to be able to manage things in a balanced way. If somebody wants to approach us and put money into a field, we've been able to see, we've seen things like that happen. We see more of that happening in this economy. We can negotiate and make those things happen. If we don't control the fields, we can't do that. It just lengthens the whole process. Now, I have no appreciation for what you're talking about in terms of what the state, the burden that you see with getting the state involved in this. It's just the way the process works. I just look at it within the town in terms of the day-to-day operation. For example, the lacrosse field. They ended up spending $250,000, I think more than they should have spent on that field. We were supposedly involved, but we weren't really involved, because we didn't own it, we didn't have control over it. We had a management, we were managing it, but as the field went down the road, it wasn't our call, it was being handled, I don't know where it was being handled, you know,
Well,
so.
I actually don't think it was under your management at that time.
Yes, it was, yeah,
Right.
they've been pouring money
Yeah, it
into
was.
that field all, right.
Under
up-
your management.
Yes, yeah, and it's
I don't-
handled separately.
I
That
don't
right?
think so.
No,
That
Mr.
was the whole reason for getting the management agreement in place, was that we were not doing a good job managing those fields. and
We
wanted
were-
you to control them.
The whole thing about that field is, the new field we're talking about, Ward Street 2.
Yeah.
Is what we're talking about there. When that field was built, it really wasn't under our control or anything like that, and then it was put in, and they sorted it and ready to use it, and then they found out they had problems with it. But we're the ones going over, taking a look at it, find out what's going on. We're the ones that went over and found out, Paul actually went over and found out that the sprinkler system wasn't working, that it was getting burnt out, and that it
Right,
was
but it
overgrown
wasn't
in
under
weeds.
your control at the time.
It was
Yes,
not
it
on.
was, yes.
It was under.
After it was developed.
No, it was owned by, it's still owned by the.
Yeah, but you were managing it on our behalf.
No, I'm very confused. We have a management agreement on the fields.
We were
When did that
managing it,
come
it was
into-
not owned by us, no.
What's the difference?
Well, here's the thing. No one had gone over to take a look at that field to find out what was going on, because we were in limbo trying to find out who owned the field, because at
Did
the
we
time-
have the management agreement at that time or not?
Yes. There was a management, I don't know if it, I don't have the management agreement with it, but it included in Ward Street 2.
I'm not sure if the earlier versions did, the latter version did, and that was after it was constructed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they were not part of the construction process.
I remember
'cause was
that.
with a
The
private
question
donor.
is, I thought that what happened was the field went downhill.
It did.
Because we were in charge of managing it, and that was a really bad idea.
Right.
So we added it to the management agreement and handed it over to you. Since you've had the management of it, are there issues?
Well, it's still not draining properly. That's the build-out
Yeah.
problem. That has not a
Okay.
management
But I'm
problem.
talking about in terms of people being confused about who's managing it, or you're being confused about who's managing
Well,
it?
no, we had lacrosse came to us, the youth lacrosse came to us, and they wanted to build a new lacrosse practice wall out there. Well, they came to us thinking we were the people to handle it. We couldn't. We had to turn them over saying, it's not our property. That we manage, we don't own it, so we can't tell you can build a structure on there. So we
I
turned it
don't
over to them.
remember that request coming to us.
I don't know if it's coming to you. Last I knew, they're going through, I believe, the building department. They went, I don't think they've got formally to that point. They're working on their way through the different departments. But they were looking to build a new practice wall there.
Is it possible to expand our management agreement such that it would allow the Recreation Commission to make these decisions if we?
We're
I'm asking
interested
the-
in
I'm asking the
protect-
town administrator.
I think I have had a brief conversation with council about the ability to protect in the management agreement Recreation's interest in making long-term investments and not seeing the field change hands for whatever purpose down the road. And she said yes, that we could certainly
What
structure
about
it.
the issue that they're raising right now about somebody wishes to contribute to make a capital improvement? Can a management agreement cover that?
Yes,
So that the Recreation Commission could make those decisions instead of us?
yes.
I think one of the other issues they're addressing, and Margaret's too, would be a good example. They want to be involved from day one in the construction and working with the people constructing, whether it's the backstop, the practice wall, or if we could turn the clock back, Margaret's too. And that didn't happen, and I don't know that that can happen.
Well, that's a great idea. The Recreation Commission should be involved in the building of fields. And so I'll take the mea culpa there, because those fields were built on my watch. That is how it should have happened. When someone wants to build on land that belongs to the selectmen, though, that's kind of where it starts, you know. So I hope that we'll learn from that experience in the future. I don't know if a management agreement can contemplate that, because we don't know what we're talking about. But we can certainly build a management agreement that will give you control over all aspects that you want to have control over, over the fields that we're turning over to you.
Well, Mike, just on the 2 points that I do have, like I said, it's happened in the past twice, where we had Beale Street for 30 years. That was taken away under, although it was our understanding it was ours, but they found it was the selectmen's. And the Habitat for Humanity, where it did go through the state legislature, this piece of property over here on Central Street, where it did go through the state legislature, and it was turned over back to the town. So on both of those issues, there's both two different arguments that I feel support recreation, where One, it was taken away from us after 30 years, and two, the town did go back and did go through the state legislature to get that land back, to build a piece of Habitat for Humanity. So there are two different, at both points you raise. The other thing you do raise about Ward Street, Ward Street 2, the new field, is that it's my understanding that you really can't turn that over to us because you don't own it. The school department still owns it. That's what I've been told. The school department, that was never transferred, that land was never transferred from the school department to the selectmen to build that field.
Right.
So I think the issue we have is
Why are we learning
that,
about this now?
Good question.
I'm confused.
We had a whole year to dig this out. Can I get a clarification on this document? And I apologize, because we just got it. The transfer that's going on now is different because it's swapping lands. The Chapter 97, as I understand it, my very limited understanding, once the fields transfer from the selectmen or whomever to the rec, and then they go in through Chapter 97, I don't see that as an arduous process compared to what we're doing with the land swap, because that's a swap of lands. Isn't this just a reaffirmation by the legislature that these lands are going to become recreation and stay in recreation?
It is, but it gives them the right to vote over it in the future, and it would be so much nicer if we could simply, here in this town, transfer control of, some land from the Bear Cove Park Committee out, who reports to the Board of Selectmen, just swap the land that they have for the land that we have. We could do that in 2 secs without even going to town meeting, because it's all under the control of the Board of Selectmen. But once you have the state involved, it becomes a huge,
So you couldn't have done what you did earlier with the light plant,
yeah.
if you involved the
Correct,
state.
we understand
You'd have
that.
to go through that next step.
And we would have had to come up with 4 times as much land, which I neglected to say. Betty Foley needs a big thank you for finding the piece of land, the wildlife preserve, which she and I went out and searched for wildlife. It's just a bad place. So she deserves a thanks. But, right, because we were looking originally in Bear Cove Park, and Betty also informed me there was no more land to swap. But isn't this just a reaffirmation, once the transfer is made to the rec, that somebody puts a stamp on it that says it's recreation, period? It isn't the arduous thing that we're trying to do, the big land swap
Well,
with kinds of land.
I imagine the state would absolutely do it. But then, I mean, at some point, maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, that's how
Which is
long it takes
okay.
them to get around to it.
We can wait.
But
We've
then,
waited this
if you-
long.
If you wanted to do anything different, you would be in the same state that we're in with Carlson Fields right now, waiting a year or two to make changes that we all think is in the interest of the town. And very much in the interest of passive recreation, offering 4 times as much land as we're taking away, but we can't even get the state to do that for us.
But Carlson
And-
Fields was already in passive recreation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we would put it permanently into that, and so,
So
but
to
we
me,
can't,
it's different.
we can't even get them to do that.
we're not interested in a management agreement. I just want to be clear about that. I don't think because it's been a bad experience for us. We're not a services organization that, if you want a management agreement, maybe we just outsource the whole thing to somebody, have them run it. But Planet Fitness or somebody like that. But I think that, again, the way the state has set this up and other cities and towns have set this up, they're very specific about preserving recreation property and land for the exact reason that we're talking about here, which is they get used as bargaining chips. And it could be a great deal. But the front end of that deal you thought was a great deal was an awful deal, okay? Because it cost more money to maintain that field because it was not done properly. Same thing, it's happened twice now. It happened with Margot's too. So we don't think that's a good idea, and we don't want to be, I'm not going to speak for my board, but we don't want to be party to that. And we can't anticipate in a management agreement all the things that come up. If there was a deal for the rec to swap land, and you came forward as select people and said, hey, we're looking at this, you need to give up this portion of the field, sure, we do a good deal, but we'd also make sure that the downstream impact of that decision was managed properly, because we take ownership of what we have. So again, I know you sometimes think of recreation as, You know, maybe it's just one of 27 different little things in the town. Recreation's a big deal in this town. We deal with many youth programs. We deal with virtually every child in the town. We deal with probably most of the parents in the town. We service, through our fields and facilities, probably 2/3 of this town, okay? And so we have a very broad mandate, and we are elected. So we'd ask you to think about it at a little bit of a higher level, and what's below us are many, many youth programs, and you know what they all are. I don't have to recite them. And those are very strong constituencies that we have to deal with, that represent, you know, virtually all the children in the town.
I mean, even when they built Ward Street, Ward Street 2, and let me just say that did not cost the town anything. That was a generous donation of 2 families within the town, and a lot of hard work put in by a lot of people to get that field in there. And it was needed. The field is needed, there's no doubt about it, for the youth across, and it was built with that intention. But when they came to us and asked us, I mean, we'd work with anybody, asked us for a right-of-way through our property to get back there to build it. There was no questions asked. It was unanimous on the board. This field is gonna be in there, we're gonna have a second field in there, with eventually at some point in time, being turned over to recreation. So we don't have a problem working with anybody in the town, especially if something that's gonna benefit the town and on recreation. If to us, it was a no-brainer. But we had some inclination that we were gonna have something to do, help out, and, you know, with the bill to see what was going on. We even asked at the time to have members of the South Shore Country Club come over, Jay come over to take a look at it. And he said, geez, this is what you should do, but it was never listened to. They just went ahead and built it. Now it's costing extra money. And again, it's no cost to the town, through the generations of the generosity of other people. They've donated the money to take care of that problem. It still has some problems, it's still wet. The field is a wet field. So they're still working on it to rectify the problems. So we don't have a problem working with anybody. These pieces of property that we're talking about, I can't see you building anything on them right now. Carlson Complex, as far as I can see, is landlocked. Powers Field, middle of the Historic Center, you're not gonna be building anything in there. So I can't see where the problem is. The golf range, it's a piece of property that is there. If someone wanted it for some reason, we'd have no problem turning this thing over.
But you'd have to go through the state.
You'd have to go through the state legislature, sure.
That's all I'm saying. It takes years, and it takes the decision.
But it is a doable. It's also, if you look at it, the agreements that we signed have taken years, over 4 years, that with the intentions of, and it was even brought out last year with the intention to turning these fields over. And again, I will say that I've said it numerous times at meetings, that process of how it works. If you didn't hear me or didn't hear me or didn't listen to me, I don't feel bad, because a lot of people don't listen to me, so.
I always make an effort.
I make an effort.
I make an effort.
I know one thing, I'm not quiet, so when I speak, people do hear me. But.
I have an idea.
Okay.
This is new information for all of us. The Rec Commission has not seen this document, correct?
I don't.
It just
this one
came to
is-
us
this one,
yesterday.
yes.
Well, right.
Yeah.
And I don't read legalese well without a cup of coffee. Would it be possible to move this to the supplement? Because you know we're going to have a supplement to town meeting.
Well,
to
that's
give
the
us some
advisory
more-
committee's decision.
The advisory committee. Is it, no fair duck and dick, I know. No fair running out in the hall. Whomever is out there from the advisory committee has that. Would you consider, with this new information and the fact that the rec really wants this to happen, I'm leaving town, which is the reason, not because of this. But there won't be another chance to discuss this and vote with the full 3 of us for several weeks. So I'd ask the advisory committee to perhaps do more investigation, let all of us do more investigation on this document, and come back and talk about it some more.
I'm Bill Wise, on the advisory committee. I live at 10 Pope's Lane. That's a wonderful suggestion. That's great.
Oh, I'm in love with you.
I'm fine with it. That'd be fine. Thank you very much.
I will admit to having I got this document this morning, I read it and my eyes crossed, and I thought,
I'm with
I
her.
have to read it again.
And again,
Really
and
understand
again.
it, and maybe talk to town
Yeah.
council about it. So if that's acceptable, perhaps we will table this for now.
Table? I would agree, because all of the arguments we've been having, or the discussion points we've been having this morning, particularly with Laura's emphasis on the state, more importantly, complicated with the Department of the Interior involved in one aspect of this, makes it very critical that we understand how this could work. So I would like to see this further explored by advisory, and we'll take another position on this when it comes back to us. If nothing changes, so I'm clear where I'm coming from, if this document from council is in force, my position, so we're clear about it, is I would not be in favor of this warrant article. But if there's another way, if council is incorrect, and there's another way that this can be worked that's satisfactory, I would certainly entertain it.
Okay, I don't understand what council wrote yet, so I'm not going to, say anything about that, except that I do say one thing I think I do understand is that this article, as proposed, would interfere with what we're trying to get done with Carlson Field. So it's possible to me that, yeah, even if we turn the other fields over, we want to hold that one until that process is completed and then turn that over so that we can get that done.
Or can the warrant article, the recommended motion, be written such that Carlson Fields, it be documented in there, that it not go to the state and the Department of Interior until...
We would just name the fields that we're
Yep.
turning over and hold that one out, and until we get that problem solved at least. But anyway, so we will, thank you very much. We'll table this and continue the discussion.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
We understand what council said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is not something you read at like
Yeah.
first thing in the morning.
Okay, going to take Mr. Hoffman. I'm sorry, did I not ask for that? I'm terribly sorry. Let us have some public comment for sure. I beg your pardon.
Good morning, Tom Hoffman, 3 Sherman Way. I'm currently serving as president of Hingham Youth Football. Just by clarity and a little background, Frank and I have had a lot of conversations. He was referring to it as Beale Street. It's properly known as Lynch Field. So that everybody understands, on August 1st, 2007, Hingham Youth Football and Hingham Little League signed a 5-year lease with the town. We'd operated over those 5 years. The current procedure is that Hingham Youth Football and Hingham Little League have the responsibility for paying for everything that has to do with the operation of that field. Irma mentioned earlier $40,000, roughly $40,000 a year. I just got the spreadsheet in from the operations of 2012, and because the two organizations invested $25,000 of money they raised to put a well in over there, and we're amortizing that cost, it brought the operating cost last year down to $35,100 for the year. Again, none of that is public money. The only public money that all those taxpayers are paying to operate Lynch Field is to cut the grass over there. Everything else is being paid for by fundraising. I bring that up because the lease was renewed on August 1st of last year. It'll run through to July 31st, 2017. So I think in the big scheme of things, what we need to think about, and I've had these conversations with Ted, when that second 5-year period ends, and Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, it then goes out to open bid at that point?
Correct.
So Ted and I talked about the fact that if this transaction happens, that the town still owns the property. However, it comes under the direction of the rec department, not the selectmen. So currently, if somebody wants to use Lynch Field, they call the selectman's office. What we resolved is that the first thing Betty or whoever answers the phone does is they get a hold of Jay McGrail, because they're being paid at South Shore Country Club, the management group, being paid by football and baseball to help maintain the fields. They'll know if it's baseball season or if it's football season. It takes the burden off the selectmen. So if that transfers, we'd go to the rec department. Why do I bring this all up? Because in addition to the $35,000 to $40,000 a year that the two organizations are pouring into that place, and Frank hit the nail on the head, the place was built wrong, okay? And it takes numerous volunteer hours. I can't, if we had to pay for all those volunteer hours to run that place, it would be well over $100,000, okay? And so my point is, when you consider this whole thing, and I'm not totally opposed to a transfer in the rec department, but when this lease ends, we got to look at the big picture. I'm pointing to these guys, are they going to have the resources, are they going to be given the resources to take the burden of operating Lynch Field? Because it's going to take a lot of resources. 4.5 years from now, my youngest kid's going to be in college. I'm probably going to be long gone from volunteering and doing this, as are a lot of other people. So the question becomes, how are we going to run that stuff? Because it takes a lot of volunteer time. Jay McGrail, I quoted him last Thursday night in front of you, said the place is a money pit. And if there was ever a reason to put artificial turf in this town, that is a great example over there. Okay, so I just want you to consider that the big picture. If it transfers, you got to give the rec department the resources to help operate that place and the other places, okay? Because there's a lot that goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments or questions on this article before we table it? Okay. I'm going to take a 2-minute recess, and then we'll be back for the Fields articles.
Where's
Thank you.
the coffee?
We are back in session, and before we move to Fields, we're going to hear the change of manager hearing for Stone Hearth Pizza, so that we can take care of that. Welcome, Mr. Taccio. Could you just introduce yourself and your client? And
yes, thank you,
tell us
Laura.
what's up?
Jeff Taccio here for Asylum LLC, which is Stone Hearth Pizza. I was before you folks probably about 6 weeks ago. Michael Ellenfeld is with me. Christopher Robbins, one of the owners, is here in the group. What's happened is I got a call from Jack Carey, the investigator at the ABCC, who said, everything's great with Stone Hearth, but we're going through the paperwork for Mr. Milan Policiano, who you remember, and he's got the license, social security number, green card. He's not a naturalized U.S. citizen and probably will be within the next 4 weeks. He's got his FBI interview this week, his retina scan, his fingerprints, his blood test.
But the problem is he's not yet a citizen.
He's not yet, and we've got an opening projected for about April 15. One of the thoughts was, do we table it and wait for him? And where there are no guarantees, we thought that it was best to come in with Mr. Ellenfeld to come in. He is basically is the opening manager for, you'll remember, I think this is the 5th of, their 6th opening that they're going to have. Michael was with Hammersley's Bistro since 1991. He's got the TIPS certification, all of the certifications that the owners have, that Mr. Milan Policiano has. And we're looking at 45 to 50 hours a week here. He's currently a resident of New Hampshire, but he's going to be staying down here during the work week, et cetera. And we would anticipate that when Mr. Milan Policiano does get the naturalization process finalized, that eventually will be before you folks, not under the spotlight of town meeting pressures, but to come back and put that back kind of on the original track that we had.
Okay. And so, I'm sorry, I missed the part. Right now, do you work for Stone Hearth Pizza right now?
Yes,
Yeah.
ever since its inception. I'm the general manager of the company.
Right, so you'll just stand in that manager place. Our main concern is that we want, whoever is the manager really does need to be on site.
When we open new stores, I'm on site.
And
24/7.
And be there until you get
Yes.
replaced as
Yeah.
a manager. That would be our request.
Yeah, no, I am on site. I'm very hands-on.
Okay.
Nope. You meet all the qualifications.
So April 15th-ish.
That's what we're looking for.
And I assume that as the
Nice.
opening manager, you will make sure that all of your initial staff are TIPS trained and,
Oh, yeah.
and prepared, just
Yep.
as we had discussed previously when you came in. Okay, great. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve an application for a restaurant common victualler wine and malt license by Asylum LLC, doing business as Stone Hearth Pizza Company, 19 Shipyard Drive, Hingham. Michael Eilenfeld, manager, subject to the approval of all towns, boards, and departments, completion of the premises in accordance with the building plan as submitted, submission of a valid certificate of insurance evidencing liquor legal liability insurance coverage in at least the minimum statutory amounts, and the approval of the Massachusetts Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Good
Sorry,
luck.
we
Thanks for
held you
making
up.
time for us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, now on to the 4 Fields articles. Where we left it, we were going to think about what we had heard, the presentation, the very excellent presentation over the weekend, and decide whether or not to vote, because we hadn't decided that. And at this point, I'm going to just make a somewhat unorthodox recommendation, but I think that it meets, our desires in regard to this. We all want to be here to vote on this article, obviously. But one of my colleagues would like to have better numbers before we vote, which seems to me to be, these are both seem mutually exclusive but very desirable conditions. So my proposal is that at this point, after whatever discussion we have today and answering any questions we have coming off the presentation last week, that each of us write a letter to the advisory committee with our opinions in it, so that they will have, because they're going to vote it before you get back, so that they will have the advantage of our thinking. And then when you return and when we get our numbers, we meet again and we take a formal vote on the project, so that hopefully that will meet everybody's needs. What do people think about that idea?
I think that's a good idea, because I think the three of us from various sources support the concept of fixing the fields. There's no question. Even the petition article is in support of that. But there are some issues going on right now, and you rightly tee up the idea that I do have some questions about future costs, and maybe we can get to some of those in the discussion. And also, there is a meeting this evening on drainage, which is an issue that has to be resolved, and hopefully by the time we get those questions answered, we can probably put a positive motion forward. So thank you for that consideration.
I would have preferred to vote today. However, I do have questions about numbers. I am going to be sending, I'd ask that the school groups try and maximize, and I know you're doing it, the ability to raise private funds. And this afternoon, I'm going to finalize an email to our town administrator asking for clarification on the naming bylaw, because I thought I understood it fully. Little did I know. There's nuances. So I have a list of potential, my interpretation of potential naming opportunities. I'd like to have one of our, I assume it's going to be council, saying yay or nay. Because the objective would be to offset as much as we can off the taxpayer. And also give the opportunity for some of these beautiful, potentially beautiful new fields, that someone could pay for them. I'd also like to hear a little more about the alternative plan, and especially and thank you, Ben, wherever you are, he must be working. He's a great contractor, by the way. He produces an awful, I've seen some of his work and it's beautiful. I'd also like to hear a little bit about the last page in his presentation, which was a master plan. That was kind of interesting to see, and I'd like to see what that's all about. I don't know if you can pick that up, but is Jim in there? Can you pick it up, Jim?
Okay, well, my reason for proposing this is because I know we all want the advisory committee to have the benefit of our thinking, and I think that this allows that to happen without forcing anybody to do anything they don't want to do, which we don't like to do. So if we have consensus on that approach, then we'll take some time to discuss the merits of these 4 articles to get, any further discussion we need to have or questions answered before we do write those letters. So on the first, on the school fields articles proposed by the school committee, is anybody going to represent the school committee for us? Please join us, Mr. Estes. And I'll just ask my colleagues, based on the presentation, if they've had any more thoughts over the weekend that they'd like clarified.
Surely. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, Dr. Schreier's not here, but to my colleagues, I had a lengthy discussion with him on the parking, which was a question, and he, I guess we were on the phone for about 40 minutes or so, where he went through the parking plan and the number of spaces based on an event in November in 2011, and a count of cars that took place at that event, which was attended by 2,000 people. And he shared with me, and I won't go through the details, but for the benefit of the folks at home, that the net increase of 88 spaces, excuse me, will give us a total of 556, I think is the number he told me, of total spaces on the fields.
Those numbers aren't correct.
Okay, well, correct me then.
Sure. There's a net increase of 103 spaces.
I'm sorry, you're right. It is 103. It is, and there's 88 spaces
And
on the
88
grass.
in an overflow.
On the overflow
parking
on
lot
the
as
grass.
well. So overall, the total number of spaces available will be 625.
625. Oh, that's different than what he told me. Okay. Okay. That's fine. In any event, he explained to me that that the numbers were adequately to your satisfaction, and they seem to be to ours. He did, in addition, talk about no parking on the streets, the need for police enforcement, and all of that, which we all understood, and I guess some discussions with some nearby facilities for those few rare occasions where a shuttle bus might be made available as to help assist in any crowded event.
Right. There is a formal large event plan that has been worked on and along with the chief of the police.
Yes.
So there is a plan for off-site locations, and forgive my voice, strained it over the weekend, to enable, and this is something obviously that should be utilized not just for school events or athletic events at the site, but also for any other large town event. Currently, obviously, you bus folks in for town meeting and whatnot, so there is a plan in place.
Yes, and he went through the various components with me as to where the various spaces were, so I found that question, that answered my concern on that one. The drainage question, I think, I understand there are two aspects to that, one for the Conservation Commission and one for the Planning Board, and both of those are being addressed, one tonight, I'm hopeful of, and the town planning engineer is reviewing the documentation on the drainage, and that should be resolved. And I have a very specific concern here. The concern I have is town liability in terms of if it's not adequately designed, and I rely on others to do that for us, that make sure that the town is covered accordingly, and that we look at this because of the nature of what the fields will take. So I am hopeful that we'll get a green light on that, but I'm not an expert in that area. My only expertise is in the making sure that we're covered so that there's no issue for the town on that. So that we'll know more, I would assume, in the next week or so.
Sure. My understanding with respect to the vote that the planning board took granting site plan approval was conditioned upon the appropriate drainage plan being approved by the Conservation Commission to the standard that has been indicated and which would be acceptable.
And whatever changes that are required from that, I assume that those costs would be put on the project to make sure that they're covered. So that may make the numbers change a little bit. Again, from a discussion I had with the town engineer, he didn't expect it to be extensive, but there will be some work that needs to be done, and it needs to meet their requirements. But that was the town engineers, not the planning board engineer that they had engaged for this review. So
correct. There was a meeting last week to discuss this very issue. I believe Mary Savage Dunham, Roger Fernandez, our engineers council were all present to work through this. So I think they're trying to work this through at the staff level to get it to a point where the engineering is such that it will work. Hopefully the fix will not be that much more expensive. The town's peer review consultant will be satisfied with what is being designed and that it will work as intended.
Good, so we're hearing the same thing, and that's.
Precisely.
That's good. And then I have to, there was one other issue, and somebody told me, but, you know, it's like the 4.5 million we heard Thursday. That number has changed, and I know it does as the work goes forward. The cost of maintenance and the replacement of the turf field, when we did Margaret's Field, the benefactors, as we talked earlier, the benefactors put a plan in place to replace if turf had gone through and lights had gone through and all that to help us with that. So I did not hear the maintenance cost, the replacement cost for that, because that's something we're going to have to plan for as part of the future. Do you have those numbers, Ray?
I don't have the numbers specifically for the replacement, you know, would be 15 years or perhaps more down the road. I do think it's something the town would have to plan for.
Right.
We have had some discussions with some of our private donor groups about the possibility of setting up a maintenance fund.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that's been solidified on that front as yet. But certainly that's something that could be explored. But ultimately, I believe, and I think the school committee believes, that if the town sees fit to approve the article installing or paying for the installation of artificial turf, that it would also, in the future, pay for the replacement of that installation.
Okay. But I think in the interest, because as much as we're saving, as was rightly pointed out on the grass maintenance, there will be some grass maintenance, but the replacement of the turf is a critical issue. Some people have called me about the removal of those of the turf and the replacement and the environmental impact, et cetera, et cetera. So it would be good to get a handle on that. I think those would just, whatever we know at this juncture,
Sure.
we should make sure we talk about that at town meeting, because it's something that they should know.
No, I agree. And just to allay the concerns of those who have approached you with respect to environmental concerns, my understanding is there is no environmental concern with respect to the products that go into making this.
No, that's my understanding from the Margaret's experience as well, but the question really is the removal of the field and where does it go? That is the environmental issue, really. So that's it. Okay, those are my...
Do you mean relative to the recycling of the artificial turf?
Yep, that's an
I wonder
issue.
if they can do that.
They do.
They do.
They do recycle it?
Yes.
They do.
Yeah,
That's
they do.
interesting.
Looked it up, because somebody had given me that, and when I looked it up, it's not a problem anymore. What I think you're hearing, Bruce, is from people that remember the original
It's
artificial
changed.
turf.
It's a...
That was fraught with all kinds of problems, including becoming a lumpy field. So Lynch would look pretty good with the original, compared to the original artificial turf, which was, it was good, but you don't want to be the first one out there.
No,
Well,
no,
obviously-
It's like the lights. The technology has advanced considerably since the early days.
And Tom Hoffman's suggestion is a good one. Obviously, if artificial turf were ever to be considered for installation at Lynch Field, you would dig it all up, put in a drainage system underneath, and then regrade it, obviously. And that's one of the benefits of artificial turf, because it involves a much far superior drainage system than natural grass. Apparently, as you're seeing at Ward Street, Margaret's too. Natural grass not draining too well.
Well, the Conservation Commission, to their credit, I walked that field with them at the time, and that was the issue that they were worried about because of it being so close to wetlands. So as I will work through the numbers, which I am, and I will pen my letter to the advisory committee.
Questions?
Yes.
Ted, funding. My understanding was this was not going to be a borrowing, or is it now going to be a borrowing?
This was always going to be a borrowing. It has never changed. My position has been
Okay.
clear on this, that the town really, absent wanting to go into its fund balance and push
Okay.
below the threshold, was always going to be a borrowing. I think the confusion that I've heard out there is that it could have been a debt exclusion in addition to being a borrowing. The forecast that I've given you includes debt service for a borrowing within the tax levy and not asking taxpayers to pay additional for this.
And we will only borrow what we need?
Well, we always only borrow what we need, but in this case, I'm using an estimate and a number of $3,750,000.
Okay, so depending on how much money is raised privately, Like if Bill and Melinda Gates walked in and said, we'll pay for the whole thing, we'd find a way to do it.
We won't borrow anything, that's for sure.
So it's something between 0 and that.
Just to be clear, if the article were to go forward with a $3,750,000 appropriation, that would be under the jurisdiction of the school committee. Whether they got $1 million or a penny, they could only spend $3,750,000. And if someone gave them $5 million, they could still spend the $3,750,000.
But I'm sure they wouldn't. They're not that kind of people.
I just want to make sure you understand that's up to them. It's their jurisdiction.
Okay, they're not that kind of people. The vote, so this is a 2/3 vote.
Correct, it's a 2/3 vote at town
The
meeting.
first article you're talking about?
Yes.
Why, yes.
Because it's a
Yes.
borrow.
Any
The
debt
borrowing,
issue is a
that's-
2/3 vote.
Because for some reason, I thought it was going to be put into the operating budget. But
We
No, I
had,
think the
we had
confu-
briefly talked about possibly using some of our fund balance and borrowing the rest. But what goes into the operating budget is the debt service for the borrowing.
after town meeting, to respond to some of Bruce's concerns, and I've already had conversations with some of the sports groups and Jay and John Ferris. I'm going to call together a group to talk about the master plan, and part of that will be maintenance, because it's not only the new fields, but we've got to talk about Lynch. Tom spilled the beans on that one. That has to be dealt with, whether it's sooner or later. But also, we've gotten some interesting information from a couple people, and I can't remember who all got the email, that they would like us to look into using green products, which is not such a bad thing. I don't know what the impact of that is for fertilizer and whatever, because we're near the Weir River watershed. So I think that needs to be looked at. But after town meeting, we'll get a group of people together and begin that process and get it done, and then have a good idea of all of our fields, what kind of money and what kind of maintenance over what kind of a timeline. Then one last thing. Again, I said I will be sending the town administrator questions, and I'll copy the school committee, not to worry, and Dr. Gallo, on just getting clarification of what can be named and what not. Ever the optimist that somebody's going to come with a good chunk of change from somewhere. So we want to definitely give them the opportunity to help here. And I'm going to be writing the letter, but I'm very supportive of this. So, next.
Okay, my questions. First, just piggybacking again on the drainage questions, how that works. The delineation of the fields, it stays, except for moving the softball field across the street, it stays within the current footprint of the athletic fields. And then there are those, that open space right next to them that has drainage issues too.
You're talking about the lacrosse field area? Where are you talking about?
Well, do they play lacrosse out? The area that is furthest.
The far parking lot?
On the other side of the far parking lot.
You mean across Union Street?
No.
Oh, yeah, on the other side of the far
You're
parking.
standing
Yeah, those
looking at far, and it's on the left.
Those are soccer and lacrosse fields.
Okay, yeah, well, right, but you're not doing anything. Does the drainage plan cover that area? Because it seems like, I don't know anything about this, but it seems like drainage is all connected, and if the water
Right.
isn't over here, it goes over there.
It does in a way, and I'll try to explain. I'm not, obviously not an engineer, but it's not going to be dug up and a new drainage system put into place,
Right.
similar to what we're doing with the baseball field and the field hockey area.
But it seems like
on
what
the
you
other
do
side.
over there has
Right.
an impact.
Right. What we are doing is we're installing a drainage system under the far parking lot, where currently no drainage system exists.
So that
Right
should help a
now,
lot, right?
right now, all of the water from the current far parking lot at the south end just sheet flows off to those far fields toward the water source there, okay? Our understanding, actually, through experience, is that those are not the wettest of the fields that we have. It's around the baseball and the field hockey area that are the wettest. Because we're installing a new drainage system under that parking lot, expanding it, putting a new drainage system in, that will now improve, excuse me, the way the water flows from that lot onto the fields beyond it. So
Okay.
that will improve the overall drainage system of the site.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. it seems to me, here's the next, well, let me just address one other question I had before I get to that. In terms of the bleachers and the number of bleachers,
Yes.
I know that you guys have put an incredible amount of thought into what's really needed, what's required, because you wouldn't want this to cost any more than it has to. And so I guess some people had suggested to me, which I was not involved in the planning process, but I'm sure it came up, the idea of having some removable bleachers for the big events that you don't need to have there all the time. And I just wondered, what's the thinking behind the number of bleachers that are being
Sure. We did spend some time on this in a couple of school committee meetings a number of months ago. We tried to think about the size of certain events, the number of events that would be of a particular size, and then we took into great consideration the number of seats that we currently have. We obviously didn't want to lose that many seats from what we currently have in the area where football is played currently. We have over 1,900 seats in the current bleachers. So actually what we're installing or proposing to install in the new multi-purpose field area is fewer seats than that. But it will still meet a threshold that will enable us to serve all of our regular events plus the large events that we do have throughout the year. The occasional special event similar to the football game a year and a half ago that was large. And it also, the way it's designed provides the ability to have a back-to-back system where we can have bleachers facing the track as well.
Yeah. But I'm sure it came up in your thinking, but there's not really any merit to the idea of having some of them be permanent, some of them temporary?
We did discuss that.
I figured you must have.
The concern about the temporary bleachers, there were a couple of things. One was where they would be stored, what the surface underneath them would be. Would it be grass? Will we have to put a concrete pad down? There was concern about damaging the field, moving on and off. There was concern about the logistics, the timing, the manpower involved in order to set them up, put them away. And the other concern was, a lot of discussion is centered around the Title IX issues. And a lot of the components of this project, both in how it's going to be used as well as the facilities that are intended, are aimed at providing better equity for the two genders. And in the past, we've had situations where, well, we have, a girls' game and there's no bleachers. So our thinking was if we provide a facility that will accommodate all of the sports, including girls' lacrosse, which is the widest field, and provide the same details to that facility, including permanent bleachers, then there can be no inequity among the genders. So no matter who's playing there, it will be the same facility and equitable for both genders. I think really it came down to a little bit of that, the logistics. The concern about damage.
Increased operating costs, for
Increased
sure.
operating costs, storage.
mechanical.
There were a
It's
number of
mechanical,
things.
So it can break.
That's right. That's right. A fellow
Would you-
school
yes,
committee
please.
member is reminding me of something I've forgotten.
Carol Falvey. Just on the issue of the seating, the other thing that Margaret spoke to us about is the importance of having a visitor seating area, that it's really a bad policy to mix opposite teams. Sometimes things get very emotional, and she really felt for safety purposes, it was good to have two separate seating areas. And
Irma can tell you
secondly-
that based on Situate on Saturday.
Absolutely.
Secondly, on the,
Was your life in danger?
You know what? Let me put it this way. It's like being at a college game.
the main bleacher, she also did a survey of the towns with Friday night football games. And she said on average, they have about 1,500 people attend those games. So part of our thinking in terms of we don't want to lose what we have is also that we want to be able to accommodate that seating. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks for the clarification, because people were asking me about that, and
Right.
I didn't know.
So and just to echo that point, I know some have suggested that, well, we really don't need that many seats, because how many events are there during the year where you really do need more than 1,000? And part of improving these facilities are providing opportunities for our teams to enjoy an experience on artificial turf under the lights on occasion. And we have adopted a usage policy that provides those opportunities. It's a very conservative usage policy. It's very mindful of the community and the neighbors, but it does provide particular opportunities for certain sports teams to play. And for instance, we will have a few Friday night football games every year. That's the plan. I believe, and I think we all agree, that those games will be community events, community destinations, where not just 300 parents show up, but, you know, perhaps 1,000, perhaps 1,500 will come, and it'll be a destination on a Friday night for families in Hingham to come, maybe go for dinner before, after, meet up, enjoy the game, support our teams, and we wanted to make sure we had ample seating to accommodate that.
Can I add something to what Ray said? In doing my homework, calling around, I called several other towns where I've met selectmen that have put in complexes like we're going to put in, where they've actually increased seating where we're not. And what they have found the experience is, the community begins turning out. And it really is, it becomes more like what I grew up with in the Lantern days, where it is a community type of affair, where you will get a couple thousand, 1,500 people coming out on a fall Friday night. So I think the seating is going to be just fine for that. And it is too bad we can't use the movable bleachers, but I think all the things Ray covered, plus the fact that they're mechanical, and mechanical things break, and as we know, our capital program deals with that all the time. So I think they made the right call.
Okay. Thanks for that. Then here's somebody called me and asked me this, a fairly fundamental question that I realized I was not all that clear on. The article Y, School Fields 1, which is the basic project. The project that you have been permitting has a turf field in it.
Correct.
And I gathered from the things that we've said that it would be, that obviously costs would change if it was a grass field.
Correct.
And I'm not sure in which direction. Probably initial costs would be lower, but what happens then to the drainage issues? Because I know the drainage issues are significantly worse with the grass field. And I gather that since we didn't permit it, we don't have a concrete idea of what the changes in costs would be. Is that right?
That's right. We do have a sense of what the delta for the upfront cost would be. Natural grass, it would be a reduction of about $450,000 upfront. Okay. But over the life cycle of the field, it would end up being a wash, essentially.
Right. I understand that, but that doesn't include the drastic changes in drainage costs. And those are upfront costs in terms of putting the drainage system.
That's right. The drainage system associated with the artificial turf field is a superior drainage structure. It's really, I think, personally, after reviewing the engineering plans and talking to our engineer about it, and knowing the condition of those fields over years, I think it's the only solution for these fields. I think if we install natural grass there, again, they will continue to drain poorly. It will never be fixed to the level. And frankly, I think the Conservation Commission would have a hard time approving the drainage plan for a natural grass field. I think the only reason that this works well for the drainage is because of the superior engineering of the drainage structure under an artificial turf field that's going to be completely rebuilt because it drains vertically and it flows at a different rate. Our intention all along, school committee spent a lot of time talking about this, what we felt was part of a base project, what we felt was going to be the smartest thing to do moving forward for this facility. And, over a year and a half since the special town meeting, I think we've all learned a lot about drainage and the difference between drainage structures for an artificial field and a grass field. And I think that we firmly believe that this project should proceed with an artificial field because of the drainage primarily. There are a whole host of other reasons as well why we've pursued that. But I think first and foremost, and particularly since it's on the agenda tonight, the drainage is key to this project, and it works best with the artificial turf.
That is so counterintuitive, Ray.
It is.
It just doesn't.
Well, I think when you have artificial turf, you get to put whatever you want
Yes.
underneath it in terms
Yep.
of drainage. But if,
Yep.
grassroots need what they need, and it
And
just is what it is.
I think the package that Carol Falvey put together that explained the whole artificial turf, that's the first time I'd seen something like that. It's really good, and I've done an awful lot of reading, God forbid, on the internet. But the package she put together, it really explained it very well. Ray, in terms of your cost, when you look at the cost of turf versus grass, did you look at the fact that every 5th year or so you have to rest the grass? But you should, not have to. You should rest the grass field, which means you've got to go rent space
Sure.
somewhere. Okay.
You know, I think it might even be more frequent than that. I mean, I know that, you know,
Especially if the fields don't drain well.
Right. I know that Tom Hoffman will tell you that they try to rest Lynchfield every year to some
it never
extent.
happens.
And they often send the football teams over to the middle school to practice. Well, we can't do that right now, obviously. So sometimes Lynch doesn't get the rest it needs, and it gets worn down more and more. So it's a great point. Natural grass fields do need to be rested, and that's why folks talk about how many fields we have in this town, but we still don't have enough fields because we have so many kids playing sports. Not
And
just
adults, and adults.
Of course adults, of
Okay.
course adults.
Just want to clarify
But
that.
the resting point is a great point.
Well, my next question relates to how the articles work together, because we have Article Y, which is the base project, and we have Article Z, which would authorize the appropriation of funds for the installation of a turf field. So does that mean that that $400,000 increase that you mentioned for turf fields would come under Article Z, but would not be included under the base price that you would put in Article Y, which came before town meeting?
The school committee is permitting and intending to construct a project that includes artificial turf. We would hope that the town would support the financing of that installation of artificial turf. But I think the school committee is committed to moving forward with the installation of artificial turf in any event.
And what happens if Article Y passes and Article Z does not pass?
Then I believe the school committee would seek private funding for the installation of artificial turf.
Okay.
What if Y and Z pass?
That was my next
Oh,
question.
good, sorry.
If Y and Z pass and the funding for the artificial turf is in both articles, now you have double funding.
Yeah, I believe
I
that.
hope you'll give it back.
Yeah, I believe that we'll work
Going
out.
to do a second field?
I believe that we'll work out the numbers so that it's only what is needed for the project, not double.
So my initial hit was correct, that the $400,000 for the artificial turf would be on Article Z. Then Article Y would have everything else in it? Not the cost of the artificial turf?
I believe that's correct. We're
Okay.
currently working with advisory on the comment
Okay.
for that, and there'll be some discussion on that tonight. So Tom Piles is the primary author of that for advisory. And we've already been having some discussions. We'll continue to work together, and Tom's doing a terrific job. My first read has been terrific. So I think we'll be able to work together to make sure that it's clear for town meeting.
This is a
and
little
there's no
confusing.
misunderstanding.
Is there any intent to do 2 artificial fields? Like if
no.
the 400, okay.
No.
No, one.
No.
There was at one
Just a
point.
question.
No, we initially, as you say, we initially intended to permit a second artificial turf field only for the ease of permitting at the same time. We never intended to build now or to include it in the project. So we've taken that off of the permitting as well.
Okay.
Can-
Okay, well, I'll rely on the
Can I-
advisory
can I
committee to
ask a-
clarify this for all of us.
There was some confusion Thursday night. You clarified it when Carol said, yes, we're invoking Dover.
Right.
And then, and I did get a legal explanation, which somewhat supports. The fact of the matter is, Dover is at work, whether we invoke it or not.
Right.
And therefore, that's how you got the abbreviated approval process, and that's fine. But I just wanted the public to be clear about that. Regarding the lights.
Actually, if I could just one point on Dover before you move on. What folks don't realize is that Dover didn't come out of the blue, and it's not just pursuant to case law, it's a statute. But actually, if you look at our zoning bylaw, the language in Dover, which exempts educational uses from zoning restrictions, is right in our zoning bylaw.
Right.
So you don't have to look to case law, you don't even have to look at the statute. It's right in our zoning bylaw.
But the approval process is what is different. It's more extensive for, if you will, non-educational applications. But in this case, we followed that. I know you didn't think it was streamlined, and I'm sure it wasn't from a.
Yeah, I would argue we began permitting on December 3rd, so I would argue.
I know.
This is no bargain.
Yeah. I know.
We're not famous for those speedy
We
permitting.
don't do
It's easy to do business with.
That's okay.
But with the lights, then the light article, you indicated, I thought you indicated you were seeking, didn't have to, again, because you're not invoking Dover, you didn't have to seek a light approval, but my understanding is you are. Now, our town bylaw suggests 2/3 vote, but that will not be required on this one?
Which town bylaw are you referring to?
I thought we had for lights on the fields.
It's a bylaw, 35 feet.
If,
35?
yeah.
35 feet that's a zoning bylaw. That's the
Right,
height restriction,
the
not just
height
for lights, but
restriction.
for any
Well, we
height.
needed a 2/3, there was a 2/3
That's
vote.
because it was proposed as a zoning amendment, an
Right.
amendment
If
to
it's a
zoning.
zoning amendment, a zoning change, that needs a 2/3 vote to change the zoning bylaw.
Okay, but that's not at play here
That is
because
correct.
Because of Dover.
Dover.
That's correct.
That's why I say Dover is in fact, that's what we're following because you're an educational institution.
Yes.
That's right.
That's
That's the appropriate law that applies.
Right, okay. Clear.
Okay, I'm
I'm
good.
done.
Okay, is there anybody else, yes, who would like to speak? Yes, Mr. Shea.
Andy Shafter, 32 Middle Street. I am a member of the school committee, but also, great thing about going to all these meetings, you can also be an observer and just find some things. First, Ray, one thing, Bruce, is when you talk about that article about the lights, remember, I think some of these articles that Ray did a good job authoring is, we always say we're going to come back with a menu of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's where the lights came up.
No, he mentioned that the other day. That's
the
good
first
that
thing.
you remind us.
The
of
second
that.
thing is listening in the audience and talking to people. There gets to be a lot of confusion out there on the seating. They hear all these different numbers. And as my colleagues have stressed there, the size in the main bleachers is 1578. That is less than what we have. The visitors is 237, which gives us 1815. The third component, which people tend to forget and are not in the multi-purpose field, is we have a state championship track, cross-country, indoor, outdoor team that is our largest participation sport. And there is facilities there, bleachers for them of 387. So when people talk about the 2,000 number, it's a component of three different components. So I just think there should be clarity on that. And then third, Irma, you mentioned about that master plan, just on cherry picking everything. That was not presented last Thursday night. That was a slide after the fact. And that slide.
This one.
Right.
Yeah, not Irma's master
No,
plan. I will leave town.
Excuse me. When Mr. Burnham
Yeah.
presented on Thursday night, he had a presentation. And then at the very end of his, which he did not show the public, there's another slide about a master plan that you referred to earlier. That master plan talks about a different location. Mr. Bruce asked Chairman Carol Falvey, did we look at any other locations? And she said, we're not empowered to buy anything. So I think when you say on the TV or people watching, want to know about the master plan, his article does not offer a master plan. His article offers the same location.
Agreed.
The master plan would be a different facility.
Agreed.
And stuff. So I just don't want people to think there's some sort of master plan out there that we're not presenting.
Agreed. My question was really, because he was nice enough to send it to Kristen, who got it out to us, because we couldn't really, I mean, I think my eyes are going. I couldn't follow up on the screen some of what he was showing. And at the very end was this one slide, and I'd like to hear the story behind that one from them.
Right, and everyone, it's always great to have a master plan, but specific to his article, it has nothing to do with his location. The location still remains at the high school. This was down on Route 3 or something like that.
Good point, because people at home
No, the
Could
question,
easily-
I was the one who asked the question
Right.
about, did you look elsewhere?
Right, and then, but she mentioned the master plan, so I didn't, people might think, well, what's this other master plan out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that has
good
nothing to
point.
do with the article that it's on the table. Thank you.
Good point, thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Hoffman?
Good morning, Tom Hoffman, 3 Sherman Way. When you go through your consideration again of all the warrant articles and the economics and the numbers, I remind you that I stood up here last Thursday night, and I'm in disagreement with Bill Seymour. Based on the research I've done with 8 college athletic directors, let alone all the other high schools we've had to deal with, where as Hingham Youth Football, we've had to go out and rent to play home games in other towns. So I've, got a network of people I've talked to about their experiences. What I'm going back to, their economics compares 1 artificial turf field to 2 natural grass fields. In my survey, they say, no. It replaces 3 natural grass fields. So keep that in mind in the numbers, okay? We're all getting worried about what it costs up front. My experience has been, the $28,000 to $30,000 number mentioned. Lynch Field is a great example on why we should have artificial turf, okay? Think about that Hingham Youth Football pays Barry Steen in the evenings to come in August, $600 to do an original lining on the field. Now, Barry is also an employee of the school department that during the day, that's what he does. The problem is, every 2 weeks, Barry's got to reline the field. And we do on a volunteer basis. We spent $2,000 in paint. So I want you to think about that. The other thing you need to think about when you're looking at artificial turf, let's suppose we don't do artificial turf at the high school. We've already talked about the change in the drainage problems. The other consideration is that new field won't be ready for 2 years. We all learned the hard way, you need 2 growing seasons, not 1. Because Lynch Field really had 1 growing season. You need 2. So you'd have that particular field out of service. And you've got the fields at the middle school are out of service probably for another 3.5, 4 years. So think about that. The last thing that I thought about since the last meeting, I forgot to mention, I'm proud of the fact that my daughter's at Columbia University playing lacrosse. We all remember the blizzard 3 weeks ago, this past weekend? Well, on Friday, they had 12 inches of snow in Manhattan, okay? The next day, on Saturday at noon, they were out on their artificial turf field. It was plowed, brushed off, and the Columbia women's lacrosse team was out practicing on the artificial turf field. If this was Hingham, you know how they do that? You go over to the Cohasset Sports Complex and you pay them $300 an hour to rent their turf so you can practice. All right, so think of that when you look at the economics. Thank you.
To his point about the middle school, middle school fields, optimistically, spring of 2016. More realistically, summer, fall of 2016. So until then, and this is where, when I started doing the economics of this, and forget the emotion, forget all the taglines here, but the pure economics of this thing say it can prove in. So until the fields come, the middle school, until perhaps something is done at East, money is leaving town that could be better spent here.
Okay. Anybody else, comments or questions on these?
Can I ask you one question? How did Saturday night go?
Very well.
How much money?
Well, let's say what Saturday night was, please.
Oh, Saturday night, yeah. Saturday night was a fundraiser, and Carol mentioned that last Thursday.
Yeah, let me comment again. It was called the Big Green Party. The fire marshal came in and studied the facility and said he could put 1,000 people in here, but because there's only 2 entrances and egresses, he set it at 500. So what happened was there were over 500 tickets sold, but there was an accounting done. A lot of people said, well, we're going to buy the tickets, but we can't make it. Okay. We actually had green bands. There was 500 of them, so if you walked into the party and we had police details there, folks got the green band on there. So about 480 showed up. I don't have all the numbers yet, but, and Andy, you can correct me, Andy Schafter's doing that seat campaign at $250 a seat. My understanding is they've already got commitments for 167 seat sponsorships at 250. Warren Pellissier can speak better to this. He's president of Hingham Sports Partnership, but a couple of people approached him with what I'm going to call very major donation commitments because they want to see it happen. So we've got that going. In terms of the net revenues from the party itself, it was never intended to be a big number. It was, let's get your hands around what the project's about. Let's look at the diagrams, start talking, thinking, and what it's going to take to get approved. what the benefit's going to be, but that they've said all along it's got to be a public-private partnership. We get that. And we're out aggressively raising the private funds to reduce the amount of borrowing that would have to happen. So all in all, it was a great kickoff. There's a lot of support, and people are very interested in supporting it from a private standpoint. Okay. So it was a great event. And the one thing that the landlord's going to be very happy about, it's right now, just about 11 o'clock. There were a couple guys that are from Hingham. They're attorneys. They saw the building. They're leasing Braintrees up in 6 months, and they're calling the guy this morning. They want to lease office space. So
But where will we have parties?
on the third floor.
Oh, the third floor, okay.
That's wonderful.
Seriously?
Yes, I myself was standing looking out the window at the harbor and thinking, what business could I start so I could put an office in this building? It was so beautiful.
It was a great event.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why my voice is sounding the way it is. But in addition to the money that's already been pledged for the lights, the $320,000, Andy Shafter's done a great job spearheading the fundraising effort on behalf of the school committee, working with Hingham Sports Partnership and other members of a number of groups that are working on this. And my understanding is that there was approximately $150,000 pledged based on Saturday night alone. When you add that to the 320, we're approaching 500,000, so we're in very good shape, I think, at this point, and there are many more efforts underway.
Wonderful.
One question on the lights. I had to go back to is 80 foot the right number? Is 75 as good?
No.
Just in the interest of the neighbor, I'm just asking.
Sure.
80 is it?
I believe 80 is it. I think the engineer from Musco Lighting, he didn't come to the presentation here last week, but he did make a presentation to the planning board and also made a presentation to members of the public, a meeting, I think back in September, August or September, that was at the high school that I think approximately 75 or more people attended, and it was a great presentation. It really makes clear that even 5 or 10 feet in height makes a difference in the spillage and the direction that you can focus the light beams. So 80 feet is the current state-of-the-art technology that creates the situation where you can really stop the beams short at a particular point.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. And next we have any further discussion we might have on the petition article related to the fields. So Ms. Rockoff is here. Would you like to join us and see if we have any questions or things to understand before we write our letters to the advisory committee? No? You got it all answered, all the questions answered on Thursday night? Okay.
Yes, I've got all the questions that I had answered.
Okay.
Mine, will you have costs?
Yes, they will be presented to you and to the advisory tonight. I don't have them with me at the moment.
Will you have engineered drawings similar to what the ad hoc fields committee has? Because that was one of the concerns, and I'm sure you were aware of the letter that went out, but it was very hard to figure out some of the placement, and like I think the field hockey field looked like it was falling off the page.
Well, I can speak to the field hockey field falling off the page. Those were taken directly from the plans that were submitted by the school department. They placed that field hockey field on there, and if they are not planning to put it on that location, I would love to know where it is planned to be, because that's their drawings.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman?
To reintroduce myself?
No, we remember who you are.
Okay. Based on the presentation last Thursday night, and I looked at that diagram and it didn't look right to me, I did a little homework. That field hockey thing was kind of thrown in there in one of the early designs to say, how can we move everything and fit it in here? The current field hockey field is when you're driving down Union Street, heading south with the fields to your right, the girls play along that strip there. Okay. That will turn into a practice field, because their games will now be played on the multi-purpose field.
Okay.
So what happened was that was just kind of a jigsaw moving around. That is not in the current plans. The current plans call for retaining that field hockey practice area along, buffering by Union Street. There is a softball field in the one corner closest to the main parking lot, and then, of course, the JV baseball field borders the far parking lot. But that whole area is going to be regraded, and they're going to talk in the drainage how they have to lift up and change all that. So where you saw Thursday night the kind of turned field hockey field look confusing, that's not in the proposed plans anymore. That was in a much earlier. How do we? I got to tell you, it was nuts when I served on the ad hoc field study committee. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle trying to move fields around. So, okay, hopefully that clarifies it.
Okay, thanks. Yes. Oh, did you want to speak to that, or?
Well, I would like to speak to having been at these meetings and at the planning board meetings, as well as the conservation meeting. It is my understanding that the space that he is speaking of that is presently used by field hockey is not in their plan as far as being regraded and redrained. And when asked specifically as to the location of the field hockey field, the engineer, Bill Seymour, stated that that field would be placed across the baseball field in order to make sure that it was not graded on an uphill-downhill scale in which it is now and having flooding issues. And they placed that drawing on top of the baseball field. We did not do that.
Ray Estes, Vice Chair of the School Committee, that's just not true. The field hockey field is going to be dug up and regraded as part of the reconstruction of the varsity baseball field, absolutely. The only area that was not intended to be touched is the infield of the varsity softball field as it currently stands. The outfield of the varsity softball field is essentially part of the field hockey field because they're interconnected, that whole area. So that whole grass area is going to be dug up, reconstructed, regraded with drainage so it flows. It's going to be such that it flows properly. Okay, now it's uneven, now it doesn't flow, but the field hockey is absolutely included in the drainage plan for that area, which includes the varsity baseball field.
Okay, but we are not talking about the area that I asked about earlier, which is beyond the far parking lot.
Those are the lacrosse fields, correct.
Okay.
Those are not going to be dug up and redone, but because of the parking lot
But the
work.
diamond section is not going to be touched?
Of the varsity softball field, that's correct.
So what, is that a flooding issue or not?
My understanding is it's not a significant issue. It's not been part of the historical problems of that site, but really it's been more in the area of the outfield of the softball, the field hockey, and the baseball
It would probably
field.
get better when everything else around it gets better.
So I guess there's some disagreement, but that's what I'm hearing
Right.
both
I
sides.
think that the overall drainage scheme that gets approved and installed will improve the entire site. You know, right now you've heard about the incorrect sized pipe, you've heard about the surcharge, you've heard about a number of things. Once that all gets fixed, the whole site will drain far better than it does now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Falvey.
Carol Falvey, 7 Isaac Sprague Drive. Beth, the other night in your presentation, there was no mention of a new sound system. Could you answer whether that's included in your plan?
It is.
It is. And there'll be a cost associated with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else, questions or comments on this article?
Could I also make a comment about the seating?
Of course.
I would like to know how, in their proposed plans, it's my understanding when they talk about what is existing seating now, that the way that was determined was that Gale Associates went out and measured the seating at 18 inches per the length of the facility. If that is the case, and it was determined that that is the appropriate number of seating for that 240 feet length of seating, I would like to have explained to me how the new proposed bleachers is 294 plus feet, in my understanding, and is 2 rows taller. The existing is 10 rows, the new proposed on their plans is 12 rows. How is that less seating? How's it calculated?
Excuse me, Ray,
And
ST
it's
School
88.
Committee. My colleague reminds me that the configuration of the new constructed bleachers is different than what we currently have. There are no walkways up because the entrance to the seats come from behind. So there are no splits. You know, the current bleachers there are rows where you walk up and you walk up. We won't have that in the new bleachers because you will approach from different angles, different areas. The size is different. I'm not an engineer. I did review the calculation, and I know that the calculation is based on how it's done in the industry, that it's a certain number of inches or feet for every seat, and the calculation was done, and based on the size, came up with the seating. And that's how it's
Ray,
done.
I remember one of you, I don't remember if it was you, Carol, or Bill Seymour. Some of this is with ADA as well.
That's
the additional space.
That's right. A lot of it is really to make it ADA compliant because the current bleachers just aren't compliant with anything. No code whatsoever.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll probably be responding to, in our letters, include our thoughts about this article as well, along with the others, when we give our opinions to the advisory committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last article that we're going to hear today is relative to the Veterans Tax Reduction article, Article M. And Article M is to adopt the Valor Act, Chapter 59, Section 5N of Massachusetts General Law, which would permit the establishment of a program to allow veterans to volunteer to provide services in return for reduction of real property tax obligation of that veteran, very much like our tax work-off program that we currently have in existence. And I see that we have a little memo to answer our questions on that that were raised at the last meeting. Maybe you could summarize, Mr. Town Administrator, for everybody at home?
Sure. The Valor Act establishes a municipal veteran volunteer program under which municipalities may reduce the property tax bills of veterans who volunteer their time. The bill directs that such veterans must be treated as employees for the purpose of unemployment insurance, and that their property tax deductions be treated as remunerations for unemployment benefits, thus complying with federal law. As you know, that we treat now all of the tax work-off programs in a similar type fashion, this would extend those benefits to veterans. And you'd have to provide a funding source to that. I mean, the unemployment is an issue that's been raised with the Valor Act. It exists with the other act too. I'm not sure it gives us a lot of exposure because unemployment is based upon your earnings. It does have some effects for them and some of their other benefit programs, and we have, excuse me, we've had some discussions about looking to Washington to amend how we treat our tax work-off folks. They're subject to Medicare tax. They're subject, because we're a non-Social Security state, to setting up a deferred compensation arrangement where 4% of their $1,000 is set aside into a deferred compensation plan. We have to set up that plan. As soon as they end their program with us, they're eligible to withdraw those funds out of that plan. So it's a classic example of the government creating a law that creates a lot of paperwork and inconvenience for folks. But I do appreciate the concern the IRS has, and that earnings are earnings, and they have to administer the laws as set forth. So we'd like to further our conversations with folks in Washington to see if we can make some kind of a adjustment here, because we think it's a little bit onerous. But this would essentially extend that same benefit to veterans, and it wouldn't have an age restriction.
Yeah, at Ted's suggestion, I have a call into Representative Lynch on this issue, and but I understand he's busy doing some other things.
He hasn't returned your phone call?
I don't understand that, Bruce.
No.
Isn't he looking for your vote?
Yes, he is. No, he's promised he would get back to me.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is, I think this is a good thing. Do we need to wait till we get some of these issues resolved, or?
I think, I mean, the issue, it sounds to me like the issue of tax is something that exists. The intent of these articles is that we would like to do them, if I'm right, Ted, and that's we want to move them forward. And if there is an additional issue that will come up as to how we administer them, and then it's going to come back to us if it's enforceable as to how to deal with it. I think that's...
So today what you're really faced with, I think, if you are okay with some of the other issues that we've raised on the unemployment side, you have to accept the act to provide funding for it.
Let me just ask about the first piece of that is any issue that we've talked about related to, is it earnings, is it the IRS, the unemployment, is anything about this program different from the senior tax work-off in that regard?
I don't believe so.
Because
Although,
if not, it's all one problem, so we're not creating any more problems
Correct.
by...
No, that's my understanding.
correct. Although I think the likelihood of other earnings is probably more prevalent with participants in this program than in the senior work-off program, where most of the folks don't work that are in that program outside of the program work that was required. So, but that's going to be more impacting them that's going to be impacting them individually, not us. In respect, one of the concerns was, if this is considered income, does it eliminate them from other benefit programs? It could. Again, that's not something we control, because those aren't our benefit programs.
Yeah, well, presumably they would be working with the veterans agent to figure out what's the best possibility for them, whether this makes more sense than some other arrangement, right?
Correct.
And so we're imagining that the recommendations for participation in this program, I assume, would come through the veterans agent, so he would have already vetted all these.
We haven't made that determination. We would either use the senior center or the veterans, or a combination of thereof. So I think that's really for you folks to decide.
Well, it does seem like veterans would have, as you point out, would have different issues than the population that usually uses the tax work-off program.
We've expanded the program significantly over the last few years within the senior center and the Department of Elder Services. So if we're going to add to the program, I think it might be worthwhile using the Veterans Department.
Well, it just makes sense to me, because they'll have different issues that are veteran-related, and the senior center would have to come up to speed on that, and why do that? Because we already have somebody who's up to speed on it.
And the veterans, there's no income restriction, right? Or is there?
I think that's right. I think there's no income
There is
restriction.
no income
Which is
restriction.
different from the other work-off programs. And then the other thing that's different that Bruce pointed out, it's 125 hours versus 100 hours. So
Have
I
to
think,
work harder.
Yeah.
the
As
hourly
if they
rate-
hadn't worked hard
I
enough.
don't know if that's right, but...
But I would,
was trying to figure out what's the average rank in the military to attain that.
but it would seem that the veterans agent is the best place for this, because this looks like a whole lot more complex than the senior work-off.
I had a question about this last item in the memo. It says, the town would be well-served if those vets who are already receiving unemployment compensation from the state would be ineligible for our program, but I don't think we get to say that. I mean, this program is set up by the statute, and we don't get to say, well, you're ineligible for this program if the statute makes them eligible, correct?
I think what the purpose of the comment was is that cities and towns have had great success working with the governor in the last year about closing some of the loopholes in unemployment. This was not considered, and so we would ask if they might close this loophole too down the road.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Okay, well, is everybody,
Yep.
Yep.
can I have a motion?
Make a motion, we recommend positive action to advisory on Article M.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that concludes our agenda for today.
One thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Can't help but do this. I want to recognize the Hingham High School men's basketball team. They left it all on the court Saturday. I think there were more Hingham people there based on the red and the blue and white than the Situate people, but I want to congratulate them. They played an unbelievably awesome game. I frankly thought they were playing a college team with the size and the physical nature of the game that Situate plays, but they were terrific, and I can't wait till next year because they can only go higher. So thank you, and thank you to the coaches.
And wait till next year.
Next year.
Okay, just for the public, since we're on television, Friday morning, the three of us and Ted met with the Massachusetts Municipal Association. They have breakfasts from time to time around the state. And we talked about the governor's proposed tax increase, and I see in the news this morning it has moved along a little bit, but in the direction we were counseled, that there will be some changes to the recommendations he made. But the important thing is we have the Thaxter Park entity in town run by the Housing Authority, and Laura and I had an opportunity to talk to Jamie Murphy, our state rep for that area, regarding the condition of that property, and the fact that that some of the articles that have been coming to the CPC are to try to get monies to do things that the state is obliged to do. So he has promised us that he will take a look at that, and I hope this will make the folks in that community aware that we are aware of their issues, and we are trying to work with the state on those matters. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll just mention the issue that I raised there, which was that we had a specialist from the Mass Municipal Association talking about the effects of the sequester on state budget and so forth, and I just, after she spoke, I just reaffirmed with the legislators in the room. I said, the question is, do you have any idea what this means for our town budget? And the answer was absolutely definitive. No one has the slightest idea what it's going to mean. So we're just going to have to be ready for whatever comes down the pike.
That's correct.
Jamie, Representative Murphy and Mary, his aide, are planning a meeting at Thaxter Park, because they made the mistake of sitting right beside me during breakfast. So that was the topic of conversation, and then these two pounced on him. So they were going to be coming to Thaxter Park for a meeting with the residents, and I'd invite anybody else to, if they can, to go down there and make your views known to them, because we do need to help those people in Thaxter Park. 15th or 17th? I'll send it to you.
Thursday.
Is it this Thursday?
This
Oh, I'm
Thursday.
on a plane, so I'll send it to you.
Everything covered? I will ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm leaving.